Call the Township Committee meeting to order.
Judy, would you lead us in the pledge, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Adequate notice of this meeting has been provided pursuant to the New Jersey Open Meetings Law by posting a notice of this meeting on the bulletin board in the municipal building and by sending a copy of the notice along with the agenda of this meeting to the Atlantic City Press, Atlantic County Record, Record Journal, and current newspapers, stating this meeting would take place at 6:30 p.m. on Monday, May 19th, 2014, at the municipal building, Mays Landing, New Jersey. Mrs. Dix?
Here.
Ms. Gatto? Here. Mr. Gishard?
Present.
Mrs. Link?
Here.
Mayor Silva?
Here. Like everyone, can we take a moment of silence for private reflection? Michael, you have a presentation for us tonight on the American Legion building? Thank you.
Are we taking a trip back to the future, or is it really 2014? It says 2010 on there.
Yeah, but that's the
There we go.
You know what you were talking about.
What's that?
You didn't know what you were
Yeah.
Okay, most of this presentation is strictly pictures of the building itself. The building we're talking about is located at 15 West 2nd Street, Mays Landing. It's currently known as the American Legion Building. According to the papers that I put in your packet, prior to being American Legion, it had been used as a firehouse, a school, and as Township's public offices. Probably many other things along the way, too. And as you also in your packet, there's a list of items. There's been a number of inspections performed in this facility over the years, and they've all recommended emergent type repairs, but appears that very little, if anything, is ever done to follow up on those reports. Brett and I went out to the property and inspected it, try to get a sense of whether it could be saved, how far gone it is, how safe it is. And the next few slides will show you some of the interior and exterior, but really it's my opinion, and I'm not an engineer or an architect, but I've spent many years in the construction industry. I believe the building could be saved. I don't think it's beyond repair. I think that the plaster upstairs needs to be removed where the water damage is to see to what extent there's maybe rot or mold, but I really believe the building at this point would be worth saving, or at least attempting to save. Let me go through a series of pictures and then I can talk about our options. This is just the front of the building, the upstairs. The rear corner, standing in the backyard, shooting forward. I guess it's really hard to tell in this picture, but this corner up here is very rotten. There's water going through into the wall. It's hard to say to what extent the damage is there, but that's the area that the most concern me.
You got it at 703.
That's another shot at it, that same spot from the ground. You can see where the soffits, it's kind of hard to see, I guess, but the soffits are really sagging. Again, my guess is this paint is all lead-based paint, so it would probably take special handling to do something with it. Property's pretty clean. Windows open upstairs, that's never good. We were there, we watched a squirrel run in and out. So there's at least one varmint living there. Probably one of the most interesting shots. This is the side furthest from the center of town. Down along the foundation, the boards are missing. There's one small area here, which appears to be, if I was going to guess, it's probably some termites, but it's really minor. The rest of this structure looks like it's not even rotten. It looks like it's pretty good shape. Pictures are a lot better if you see. It's the same thing. Here's the wider, so you see there's really no other rot or deterioration. Now, again, I don't know what's underneath the board at the very, very bottom to the dirt line, but the floor joists appear to be fairly good, at least in this location. This is the front. The sign was there, we took it down. That chimney was a concern, I think, in one or two of those reports, but it's still there, it's braced, probably should be removed. Doesn't look to me like it's imminent, but could fall. These are some shots, just random shots of the inside. There is still some things in there we need to remove, maybe coordinate with American Legion. We need to get the rest of the stuff emptied out, but these pictures are a lot crisper. And just some random shots. This is the first floor. There's some showcases there. That's facing from the front door towards the back. I think that's a restroom there in the blue.
Mike, were you in there this week?
I think it was last week, wasn't it, Brett? Yeah, last week.
How much interior damage did you witness that is occurring as a result of the opening in the roof?
I'll show you some shots from upstairs. You really don't see anything. I expected to see the ceiling falling off and all, but it isn't yet.
Is that in the attic portion? Is it
Well, we didn't go, the attic, there's pictures in the documents I gave you, old
Yes.
pictures that show the attic is unfinished.
Okay.
I'm more worried about where that roof line meets the top of the second floor wall line, where it appears that water is getting in from the missing shingles. So upstairs, and when we get a couple more pictures here, that's just the HVAC. It looks like it's pretty well torn apart. Steps and just the peeling paint. It's hard to see in this picture. The windowsills are peeling paint. You can see that's coming off the walls. That's moisture damage. This is upstairs. Now again, the part where that wall is probably left of this door. You really can't see it from this shot. I didn't want to go too far in. I stood at the top of the steps there. I just didn't know what the floor was like. So. But there's the ceilings aren't collapsing, or, at least from what I can see here. There's just some more pictures. This is the second floor again. You really can't see the corner where the water would have been, but this is back down the first floor, just showing the electrical panels. Staircase, this paint peeling off the walls there, pretty good, the plaster. I put a couple of notes here. I contacted the State Historic Group, and no matter what we want to do, we have to do an application to them. Whether we want to sell it, whether we want to remodel it, pretty much we have to apply to them. There's what they consider to be an easy route, which is one where you might want to try to sell the building, but you place an easement on it so that whoever buys it has to maintain the historic character. They couldn't tear it down and replace it.
That's what we did with the Bank of America, which was the firehouse, was the town hall, and was sold over to Collective Federal, which became Summit Fleet and now Bank of America. Same idea.
That is an easy application, as they explained it to me. A much more difficult one would be to try to sell it and let people do whatever they want with it, which could be demolishing it, or it could be, remodeling without worrying about the historic character going along siding and things like that. My guess, from what she was saying, is a very difficult one and probably wouldn't get approved anyway. If we decide to keep the building, I think what's important, if we decide we want to keep it and use it for something, we should identify what we want to use it for before we try to decide and how we're going to go about improvements, because depending on the use you select, there could be grant funding out there. And I don't want to, doesn't make sense to, and I know I gave you copies, I think, of at least 2 in-depth reports that were never used. I don't want to do a third one that's not going to be used. I think first we should identify our end goal before we invest more money. So before we go in and start figuring out what we, or how we want to repair it, let's find out what we want to do with it, because that use may have grant funds available. There's not very much, if any, grant funds from the historic people. They told me they didn't get funded last year. I guess it's on the ballot every year, and they didn't get any funding last year. But depending on what we do, there could be others. Repairs, we could determine that we just want to try to make it weatherproof. So we stop the decay. If we do nothing, it's going to continue to rot, and it's not going to be too many years before it is going to be a demo.
Well, are there some initial steps we can take just to close that roof with some tarp or something so that we don't, run the risk of having more weather come in, whether it be rain or what, and even to board up that window, like Brett's department did at the garage in the back?
Yeah, we talked about, when we get our new bucket truck, we may be able to, while we still have two of them, get a tarp over the roof. Securing it could be,
Yeah, just to cover it up with a tarp so that you don't, yeah.
but sealing it also seals whatever moisture is in there. It's a double-edged sword, but it's
Have-
better to seal it up.
Have we reached out to the Historic Commission to?
Not the local one. I talked to the state.
Okay.
The,
Has anyone, have you identified any potential uses that the township would have for the building? I mean, is that a viable possibility, or?
I wanted to talk about all the options and then talk to you about an idea
Okay.
that Phil and Bill and we came up with today even. One of the things that we had talked about is, well, number one, we could try to sell it as is with the easement. I don't think it's even a sense in trying to not. So we could put it on Gov Deals, we could, advertise it and have a bid. Maybe somebody would pay us $1 and take it and rehab it. Problem with that is you don't have a lot of room for negotiations in the way we do things. So what we were kicking around is you could theoretically designate this as an area in need of redevelopment. Then you could solicit proposals where you could mandate certain timelines where somebody has to finish it, even if they're going to get it for $1, let's say. You have to remodel it within 6-8 months, and at least we get it back on the tax roll. We could do a pilot. There's a lot of things you could do to try to get this thing not just buttoned up, but repaired and back in use, because you get flexibility to negotiate if you do that. So that seemed like the most promising.
If you declared in need of redevelopment, would that ruling override all other agencies' opinions of what should happen to it? Specifically, it's a historical building and they have something to say, our historical commission people have something to say, but if it's declared in need of redevelopment, do they still have something to say under the law?
I don't know the answer, but I certainly would think we would want them to. I think the only reason we would do that is because we want to maintain, we want it remodeled to be what it is and was. We're not using that to go around them. We would be using that process to
Help facilitate that.
to help negotiate, so we don't have to just sell it to the low bidder who's going to just let it sit there another 10 years until it rots. We want to be able to say, we're going to sell it to you, but within the next 1 year, you have to completely remodel it and bring it up to standards, and it has to meet you have to have it ready to lease.
But not if we declare it in need of redevelopment, we wouldn't be putting it up for sale. We'd be negotiating with a developer to come in and do the work.
Right, but part of it could be a sale. I did it in Old Bridge for some property we had. We were negotiating, a redeveloper came in, we were selling the property. He had to build certain buildings within a certain amount of time. It's all negotiable. It gives you that authority. It's more like the industrial commission, if you do that.
Okay, the other thing is, according to the Historic Preservation Commission, would they go hand in glove with the, if we sold it, would they be, negotiating what kind of shingles go on, what kind of, all
They have
that
to
sort of
approve it.
thing, which they have normally done?
What we would probably want to do is before we actually put it out for RFQs or whatever from developers or redevelopers, we would want to say what we want done and make sure they've approved that ahead of time. We don't want vinyl siding, we want the lead paint removed and have it painted with such and such and consistent with such and such, whether they pick colored windows or whatever, the local. I would think we'd want all that approved before we try to get a redeveloper, because the redeveloper is going to want to know, what do you expect of me, cost-wise, so that he can see if his numbers work. Because at the end of the day, he's either going to want to flip it, or he's going to want to rent it, or he's going to want to live in it.
Okay,
All
say,
that would be done, I think, ahead of time.
say if we kept it, which, in a sense, how many years have we had that facility and not done anything to it? I mean, we have expected all of our homeowners to conform to the historic commission. And where have we been in owning that facility and not, conforming? So I think it's a very important part of our historic history. And, whoever does it, or if we do it, we want it to stay within those historic guidelines which you were talking about.
With regard to one of your options, the option to sell with an easement, you said that you dismissed it because you said we don't have much flexibility there. Perhaps you could describe that. I don't know, why couldn't we specify in the easement exactly what we wanted and enforce it, or is that much more difficult than?
I don't know if we have the authority to survive settlement. I mean, I don't know, if you go to settlement, if we can make them do certain things. I know some things can survive a settlement, but it's just, if I sell you the building and your low bid is $1, and I give it to you, I think it'd be very difficult to say, we want you to fix it up according to this, this standard, this standard, this standard. I mean, we could say, here's the easement, you got to meet according to the state standards, but what if they take 10 years? What if they, to say, well,
So we can't specify the time period within that easement?
I don't know if we have that authority.
And that's why you're
Attorney.
recommending the potential area in need of redevelopment.
Yeah, gives you a lot of flexibility to do those things.
Well, that's dependent, of course, on getting some funding, getting grants to,
No, what we're looking for, and I believe, and I try to put myself in the shoes of somebody that would want to buy it. Would I buy that building? If you were going to sell it to me for $1, would I be willing to buy it? Do I think I can make a profit? I think the answer is yes. I think it's worth some money, actually. So the higher we set our standards, we want it painted, and we want the lead paint removed properly, we want it painted, we want the shingles replaced with a certain type of shingle. Everything you add brings down what somebody'd pay for, but at the end of the day, if they had to put 50 to 100,000 in and it's worth 150 when it's done, they win, we win because it's back on the tax rolls, because we'll be collecting property taxes, and we have a historic building that's been saved. I don't know if we can do all that through just a low bid or high bid auction. I just never seen that many. I mean, I'm talking pretty detailed restrictions, detailed specs to remodel it along with timeframes.
all right, so what's that mechanism again?
To declare it in need of redevelopment, it gives you a lot of flexibility. You basically set up, here's what you want, and then you try to get somebody, a developer, a redeveloper, to come in and say that I'll do that.
And what does that cost us?
There's probably some advertising.
But that's all.
We've done, is it, what was it,
During this process involved is really primarily advertising. Thank you.
Phil, it's been a long time since I've done redevelopment.
We have done several in the past. Fortunately, we have somebody in-house, me, who can do the study, so as far as that cost, there's none. It's primarily, the advertising requirements, the notice requirements, and any legal time involved as part of it. Ultimately, we'll be adopting an ordinance establishing the redevelopment area and the controls that would be applicable to it.
Okay. Thank you.
Just some ideas, don't necessarily have to answer the question tonight, but if you want to think
Do you,
about it. talk
do you
about
want to touch base with the Historic Society?
it. With the local one?
Yep. Just to run it by them also, so
Or the
that
commission.
the commission. All right, I think, courtesy would dictate that we would talk to them. The other thing you brought up before, you said, did you talk to someone from the state?
State Historical Commission. yeah.
And what happens, and I'm sure other communities are faced with similar problems like this, when you have properties that are on the historic register, and there's no money available to rejuvenate it or to rehab it, and it's just deteriorating, what do they do about it? they can't do anything, or they won't do anything, or do they find a way to?
I don't know if they come out and enforce repairs. I've never seen that done. She didn't seem to indicate that. She seemed to be more of an agency where you come to them when you're ready to do something.
Okay.
And just about anything you want to do, you have to go to them because it is on the register. And they told me, and I don't totally understand the process, but evidently it's on the ballot, whether they get funds or not. And they didn't get funds last year or the year before, so they said there was really no funding, but that doesn't mean there's not other grants depending on what the end use was going to be. But if we go the redevelopment way, we would be hoping that it's a profitable venture for some redeveloper. And again, we'll know more as we get into it. Before we actually would make that choice, we'd try to get more documents. We just came up with that idea today.
Explain to me, you're saying that a redeveloper would come along and follow your specifications, okay? And he would put the money out for all his materials. And at the end of the day, say in a year and a half, that it's ready, it's finished, then he sells it?
He would buy it from us before he actually started work. That would all be part of it.
Okay, and then he would sell it as a what?
He could sell it, he could rent it. I mean, I don't know whether they would make it a house or an office. Seems to me like it would make a good legal office.
The redeveloper becomes the owner.
He becomes the
It's
owner,
just a
basically.
mechanism for the developer and the township to be able to negotiate certain terms and help it through the process a little bit more expeditiously than if he was just working alone, if the developer.
If he came as a single person wanting to buy it and wanting to
And just
restore
bought
it.
it, right.
The thing is, and
Okay.
again, I tried to
That's
put myself in the shoes to see if he'd be
Okay.
interested. The problem, first thing people say is, why wouldn't we just do this ourselves? Why wouldn't we put the money into it, flipping us out? Because it would cost us double to do anything that a contractor would come in and do on our own. We wouldn't be able to make any money on it. If we went out to public bid, and we'd probably have a couple $100,000 into it, and it still wouldn't be worth, that much.
But could we dictate the end use in order to get the grant, or no?
Well, I don't know about it, I don't know, I'm not suggesting under redevelopment there'd be a grant, although maybe there is something, depending on what they're gonna use it for, but we can only dictate based on zoning. Now, I guess with redevelopment, you could be more specific if you wanted to be, but again, the more restrictions you put on it, the less there would be in it. In other words, if you
Yeah, could it be
use it for a house and, you can only use it for a commercial office, and that would really reduce
Limit.
the market for someone.
Is this a residential zone?
Yes, it is.
So if we were going to get into a redevelopment situation, we would have to declare that it was commercial, because if somebody was going to get involved, they'd be redeveloping a residential use in it. That's not what that building is.
Yeah, I don't, we would probably first want to decide whether did it matter, it's right on the border, I know there's commercial on one side, residential on the other. Do we care whether this building ends up residential or commercial? Because I think with redevelopment, we can make that determination.
Right.
That's why I said that.
And was there
Yeah,
any
but-
discussion, just with regard to a better tool between area in need of redevelopment, and then isn't there an area in need of rehabilitation?
I'm not sure that there's a distinction. I asked Phil that same question.
Okay.
You can do a redevelopment plan under a rehabilitation designation. I guess ultimately it depends on the financials, so to speak, whether or not, it's easier to market it with and really it's on the abatement end than anything
Okay.
else. A 5-year tax abatement versus maybe a longer-term payment in lieu of taxes. Those are the two options. Under rehabilitation, the maximum you can get is the 5-year abatement. With the redevelopment designation, lets it go longer.
Okay, got it.
And clearly, this meets the threshold for rehabilitation as
Right.
far as the age of the structure,
Okay.
yes.
Okay.
I definitely wouldn't enter into this thinking that we're going to come out with money in our hand. It's more about getting the building back to its former glory and getting it back on the tax rolls, at least at some point in the future.
Okay. That was my
Do you have an idea of a time frame, how long it would take to explore this and get something moving?
I
I mean, are we talking a few months or a year? Or?
Yeah, well, the process itself would probably be a year, but it would take a few months for us to, or give us a few weeks to at least get our
Plan
heads
together.
together and talk about it, because we just came up with the concept today. Until we start putting numbers down and find out what requirements are there, I don't, it could drive the cost to where it's just not profitable at the end of the day. If it's not profitable, you're not going to get a redevelopment.
I will say, I've had a couple of people actually express interest in the building. Now, expressing interest and actually making a bid and agreeing to do something are two different things. But there does seem to be some level of interest.
Yeah, I have as
Solicitor's
well.
here now, maybe we can ask him the question, can we sell the building for X number of dollars and have a contract that says they have to do certain, within a certain amount of time? Penalties if they don't?
There is a way to put conditions that survive closing. They're often really tough to enforce. But if you put them in the bid documents on the sale, and the problem that you have here is you have a non-conforming use. It's been used as a non-conforming use in a residential zone as basically a governmental office for a while. And when it wasn't that, it was used as a American Legion post.
Cub Scouts met there.
Firehouse, yeah.
Dance lessons were in there.
So you, as the governing body, do not have the ability to provide a use variance for the structure.
Right.
So one of the things that you would have to do if you want to, if you want it to survive as a commercial entity, is require whoever acquires it to go through the use variance process, which you don't have the authority to do. But you can put in provisos to restore it and to make it a historic structure and to continue it that way. But as Mike points out, that declines the economic feasibility of the project. I would suggest that we look at it a little closer. I'm concerned about the zoning issue, more so than items surviving closing.
I think the moving forward with the redevelopment study and, potentially trying to deem it an area of need of redevelopment seems to be the best viable option on both sides of the coin. That's just my humble opinion, but that would be the direction I would recommend
Yeah.
potentially we go in.
Yeah, it seems as though we would accomplish both things. I mean, we really should take, the chance in doing something of that nature, the redevelopment, because, I know it would take us maybe double the amount to restore it, but it is our building, it is our town, we want to do the best that we can, and I think that would really work, the redevelopment.
Well, the advantage of that is it may take away the zoning issue.
Right, exactly.
Certainly sounds like it's worth exploring.
All right, can we come back? Is it enough time for the next meeting, or the second meeting of next month?
Yeah.
30 days?
Give us a month to get our heads together.
With some sort of, okay, after we touch base with all those other entities we talked about? All right?
Could they, in the meanwhile, secure that hole in the roof?
I think we're all in agreement on that.
Yeah, I'm not sure we can
Do
do
anything?
that
in-
with just
to-
one bucket truck. I don't.
Well, can we get someone in? I mean, it's worth it at this point. You don't want
Well,
to,
when do we get the second bucket truck in?
Lenape Electric has a great big long lift. They could go up there.
But
June or July.
Can we get a private contractor with a bucket? who
Yeah, that's
would
what I'm thinking.
Volunteer it? Like Lenape Electric?
Brett's saying something.
We'll try. We'll try with one guy.
I had suggested at our April 30th meeting that we do something in the way of a tarp, but it be preferably a green tarp, which would be less opposite Andy, less offensive to the eyes if it was green. So if that's possible, I'd rather see us trying in that direction. I think everyone would agree.
well, as long as we get it covered, Aileen, I didn't do that when I had the hole on my roof. I just wanted to get the hole covered.
Well, this is in the middle of the town, and it's going to
Well-
be there for a while by the sounds of it.
It's all right. The birds won't mind.
Cemetery won't
Okay,
mind
so we're
either.
agreed, and will you look into that issue too, Mr. Solicitor,
I will.
please? Okay, thank you. And thank you, Michael, for that presentation.
Mr. Mayor, I apologize for being late, but I have a very good reason.
Yeah, I bet you do. Congratulations.
My newest grandson arrived.
Oh, how great.
At the house, not at the earth, at the house.
That's good enough reason. Thank you. You've had a full weekend, haven't you?
I have.
Congratulations on Katie's graduation.
Thank you.
Okay, next item on the agenda is, there's no adjournment to executive session. There's no confirmation of executive session. The addition or deletion of late agenda items for consideration tonight.
Mr. Mayor, before we move that, I would, from the additions, based on the advice of council, pull item K for now.
Okay.
And I kind of just want to make a general statement about some of these items that are on the addition and deletion list. The point of the late agenda items are supposed to be for emergent critical items that we either didn't know or didn't have the information for when we were prepping the agenda the week before. And some of these items are not that. And that makes it very hard to come to meetings prepared and ready to vote when people are willy-nilly putting last-minute items on. So with that, I'll move the additions and deletions minus 8K.
Any question, I'll second it. Any questions or comments to the motion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. And Michael, her comments are,
I just disagree with that.
well, I don't think we have to have a floor fight on it, but obviously, unless the time constraints are such, and I think the item is such of a nature that if it isn't, and it's emergent, or it's even so important that the time frame has to be adhered to, then that's fine. You know how I've always felt about late agenda items. I mean, we have plenty of time to make up the agendas, and
Absolutely.
and they're getting longer and longer, and obviously, we all would like to have all the information at our hand ahead of time, and when you look at the size of these packs, it does require a lot, so.
And there's no correlation between item 8K being pulled and my comments about the late agenda. They're two separate items, FYI.
Roger, I have a
The
question.
other problem with late agenda items is that people who are looking at the agenda online and wanting to come because of certain things being covered, if a late agenda item is not published in time, then it denies them that
Absolutely.
ability to come.
Comments well taken.
Yeah, but that raises an interesting point, because at 3:30, I was looking for the agenda on our website, and maybe it's there, but I didn't find it, and I looked in the document repository, so I don't know how it gets there, but the question, only because of what was just said, I'm asking the question now. How do we know if the agenda is online, available for people to look at all before a meeting?
It's typically online, what is it, by Thursday or Friday?
But where?
On the website in the right place. I have to admit that when I go to the site, I usually end up looking around a bit, but it's there.
Well, I'm just commenting that at 3:30, I looked for it on the document repository, it wasn't there, but the main reason I said I wanted to ask a question, Bob Sandman, were any Rice notices issued before this meeting?
I can't answer that.
Can anybody answer the question?
I have no idea.
I can answer, not to my knowledge.
Okay.
All right?
Yep.
Okay. Okay. Next item on the agenda is discussions. Formal action may be taken. A, amendment to Chapter 186 of the Township Code, handicap parking. Michael? A? Oh, no, yes, early public comment, I'm sorry.
Yeah, we have a number of them tonight. First one's Bruce Stry, 10C.
Thank you. Just, I guess, to continue with the late agenda items, the reason for late agenda additions is based on the Open Public Meetings Law, 48-hour notice, kind of what we were just discussing. 10C, appointment to fill a Veterans Advisory Board. I don't see any emergent reason to have that on the agenda this evening. Most of the other ones, I'm not sure exactly, but they appear they could be time sensitive. So I think you have to be careful of abusing the early additions to agendas. They should be time-sensitive, and in this particular case, I'm not so sure that would be necessarily for tonight. I would like to correct, while I'm here, and it strays a little bit, but from the presentation, I'll just make one comment. I think Mrs. Link made actually a valid point that the township, with our property maintenance code, it is critical that we, the township, take care of our properties as well. However, I think one thing that you might have missed is that the American Legion did come before Township Committee some years ago and asked to have the American Legion building signed over to them for $1, and with a lot of plans of fixing the building up and maintaining it. But it wasn't too long after that they gave the building back to the township in disrepair. So I think your point was well taken, but in this particular case, I don't think it completely applied.
Yeah, I think wasn't that totally dependent upon fundraising and
It may have been. It certainly may have
that
been,
was
but
not something that,
I think the
was well
point is, it
carried out.
wasn't the township that continued to let it deteriorate.
okay.
Okay, my point is, perhaps it may or may not have been different, but it has not been in the township's ownership for the entire time. So I just wanted to clear the
Okay.
record on that. Thank you.
Thanks, Bruce. Anyone else?
I'd just like to make a comment about the late agenda item additions. Certainly, many of the points that have been made are true, but there is one point that I consider important, and that is when the item is not put on, that means there's another 2-week delay. And whenever possible, if we can do things on a timely basis, it's helpful. That obviously should not be at the expense of keeping the information from the public. But sometimes these things are put on here just to get the item done. So, that's all I have.
Joan Anderson, 5E.
Please speak into the microphone.
First, I want to make it clear that I'm speaking only for myself and only as an employee. At the agenda meeting, I learned that one of the changes in the employee handbook is to make direct deposit of paychecks mandatory. I don't believe that I should have to write myself a personal check and cash it every 2 weeks in order to get my pay. And I wonder what employees who, for whatever personal reasons, do not have bank accounts will have to do to get their pay. I have to buy and pay for my personal checks and consider having to write one 26 times a year in order to receive my pay to be an additional deduction from my salary. Several years ago, all employees received a notice that if they didn't sign up for direct deposit by the end of the month, they would no longer get paid. That was rescinded when the state found out it was illegal. But recently, the state passed a law saying that the municipalities may, which is permissive, not mandatory, force this on its employees. I feel I am being inconvenienced for a cost savings and convenience to the bank, since all payroll-related documents are processed in-house by the finance office, and with the huge amount of money invested by the township, I would think the bank would be more than willing to waive any fees they charge for cashing an employee's paychecks.
Thank you for your comments, Joan.
James Kerrigan, 5F.
Yes, Roger. I support A1021, requiring certain receipts to be paid back to our township.
Oh,
That's something that should have been done years ago.
And I would think that you would, because I think most municipalities for years have always wanted to maintain the control of the energy tax receipts themselves, because they belong to each municipality.
Yeah, not the state.
The fact that the state decided they could do a better job than all the municipalities in the state and take a cut out of it seemed to be a little suspicious to all of us.
That's a joke, really.
And I agree with you. That's why Assemblyman Brown and I think Mr. Gouchard's request was to put this on here with the proposed resolution of support. It makes a lot of sense.
does.
So thank you.
Can I make a comment about the American Legion building? There's no
Sure, go ahead.
number. I would like to see that building saved. In fact, if our ordinance gets updated, the HPC will receive grant money from the state office, and then that money will be used for the American Legion building.
Okay.
But first, our ordinance needs to be updated. So, John's an expert, I don't think he's here tonight.
Okay, I'm sure Mr. Jacobs is going to touch base with several of those entities just to make sure and get all the information that he presents to us so that when a decision is made here, they have all the information they should have. Okay?
I think
know
we'll
what,
have, agenda, June 12th, reader?
Grant money, Judy, but,
Yeah.
thank you, Jim.
Thanks.
Anyone else?
Yes, Chris Ayer, 5E.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I just wanted to go over the police chief salaries and the captain's salaries. I don't know if you're going to discuss a pay increase or whatever, but I would just like you to take notice that a lot of people are losing their jobs, and with the tough economy and with our taxes going up, I wish you would just consider this thought, what you're going to do as far as with our money.
Well, in
They
fun.
deserve a lot of money, you can't pay them enough, but with, our taxes going up and everything.
I understand. Just listen to the explanation when it comes up on the agenda,
Absolutely.
and we hear your comments, and thank you for them.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chris.
That's all, Mayor.
That's it? Thank you. Okay, discussion, formal action may be taken. A, amendment to Chapter 186 of the Township Code, handicap parking. Mike?
My understanding, this was brought to our attention by our prosecutor, that our ordinance needs to be updated. Other than that, I know very little about it. We need to make these changes so it's enforceable.
Have you gone through what was deleted?
I did not, I'm not sure who, Rita, do you know who did the ordinance?
Who put this on?
Did the clerks do it?
That was-
Phil's coming up.
Okay.
Mayor and committee members, what occurred was the prosecutor came and Mike wasn't in the office that day.
Phil, I can't hear you.
Sorry. Mike wasn't in the office that day. The prosecutor came and talked to Lisa, and Lisa dragged me in.
Obviously kicking and screaming.
But the
He
judge
said
did have some
drug
problems with
him
it.
in.
The prosecutor and I met with the judge, and he took our current ordinance and basically rearranged some of the language and shortened and took out some sections that weren't applicable anymore, such as, I know one section in there establishes, or still refers to what's now the Bank of America as Town Hall. So you're talking ordinance that's been in effect since 1983 and clearly required some update. The important thing is that the appropriate sections of the state laws governing handicap parking accessibility and fines are still in there. And it's slightly shorter and hopefully easier for the patrol officers to use in their enforcement.
Okay.
So there were no substantive changes to it?
No substantive additions, some substantive edits, though, let's put it that way.
And obviously, he would hear the cases if there were any violations of the...
Exactly. And if he said these are okay, and when he went through and numbered them, put them in this order, I have a high level of confidence on it.
Well, it went from $100 to $250 for an offense.
That's been in effect.
But that's been in effect, but it just hasn't
yeah.
been in our books.
Right.
Okay.
This is what he gave me.
That's what's in the packet. I don't know if you want to,
So we would make a motion to introduce?
that's what I'm just asking, if it needs to be put in a little better format, which I can do between now and then.
I'm looking at this for the first time right now. And I can see what has occurred, but what needs to be done is it needs to be drafted in a form to be introduced. I would not recommend that you introduce it in the current form.
Needs to be put into an ordinance form so it can go in the newspaper and have a second reading?
Well, yes, and people need to understand what it's attempting to do, and what you have here is handwritten notes, you have some scribbling, you have some deletions. This doesn't comply with the statute. It needs to be drafted appropriately.
How about the version with all recommended changes? That's still not appropriate?
Not for
We have
purposes of...
we have a red one at the back. Do you have that?
I have that, I'm looking at
Okay.
it now, but for purposes of proper introduction, this needs to be redrafted.
Okay.
Would you, and we'll hold it, we'll,
Table it?
can we move to table this to the next meeting?
Now, why don't we authorize it to be put into ordinance form for introduction next meeting?
Yep.
I'll make that as a motion.
I'll second.
Second.
Any questions or comments to the motion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carries. All right, thank you, Mr. Solicitor, Michael. B, the Lila Oaks Construction Company request for the township to accept ownership of Block 1132.01, Lot 50.
Roger, I would ask this be tabled,
Why?
and the reason I would ask for it to be tabled is this offer was received 3 months ago. Adequate time has passed that the planning zoning officer and the Smart Growth Committee could have reviewed and researched the offer. The subject lot is marked passive natural recreation. The lot is almost 25 acres and assessed for $24,700. It is shown on filed map 0003657 in the Atlantic County Clerk's Office, recorded November 20, 1998. The question is, did the Stonecrest subdivision approval include this lot as its open space? In the instant case, the development, meaning Stonecrest, has 3 lots in the ownership of the homeowners association. Each of the 3 are listed in the tax assessor's website as 2 basins and 1 tot lot/rec area. None of the 3 shows a tax assessment. Is this Lot 50 actually part of the decision and resolution approved for the Stonecrest project and holds the tax assessment for all 4 lots? If the township were to accept ownership of this tract, why should the taxpayers bear the cost of a Phase 1 environmental studies and outbound survey cost, approximately $11,500? The real issue tonight is, should developers be able to get planning board approvals for large subdivisions and then eliminate the open space component from their project? Will this decision open the door for every subdivision to eliminate their open space component? So I would like it tabled to go to Smart Growth to look at the decision and resolution from the Stonecrest projects, which goes back about 12 to 14 years ago. And I will tell you that you have a color map on the table. Lot 49 is the Super Wawa, and Lot 50, 51, 59.14 were all encompassed in with this minor subdivision, so that Lot 49 was created and sold to Wawa for $900,000, leaving the rest of it to total up to that 25 acres as now known as Lot 50. I believe that's the open space for Stonecrest. That's my request.
Mr. Solicitor, before we take your request, is there one way that you could check this in a speedy fashion by looking at this and coming back to us with an answer without it going to a committee group?
I could.
Okay?
Just a quick question, Mr. Mayor. Does Bill know the answer?
Phil?
Or Mike?
I have some information on it, but I don't know. Can I go now, or do you have to act on the
No, go ahead.
motion? We weren't taking this because it's offered to us. We're recommending it because the owner, who somehow retained ownership after the subdivision was done, told us he's going to stop paying taxes, and we're going to end up with it anyway, except we're going to have to pay all the fees related to foreclosing on it. So if we're going to get stuck with the property anyway, we thought the best thing would be to do a Phase 1, so we don't end up having to spend any money cleaning it up, or at least we'd have that knowledge. So what was done with the planning approval, I can't go back in time and say why it wasn't deeded, to a association. Maybe Phil can answer that, but his research suggests that it's still in the ownership of this developer. And
I agree.
He told me on the phone, point blank, I'm not paying any more taxes on it. You'll end up with it in a sheriff's sale, or, munition sale, whatever you want to call it. So we're not taking it because we have a choice. We're going to get it one way or the other.
Philip, you asked to have this put on. Did you look at the DNR?
Yes, I have, Mr. Bear, several of them. The resolution didn't specifically call for this to be held as open space for the homeowners association. That was part of the testimony from the initial hearing back in 1995. Again, it was never specifically put in there, and perhaps more importantly, and why it occurred, I'm not sure, when the homeowners association documents were filed, it only identifies the sections 1 and sections 2 as being the homeowners' responsibility of the homeowners association.
Section 1 meaning what?
Section 1 being the part that's on the west side of...
So Phase 1 and Phase 2?
Section 1, Section 2, what's been built, basically.
Okay, because in my research, which was extensive last night on the computer, they're talking planning board phases 4 and 5. You're talking sections 1 and 2, and I'm looking at 4 and 5 in these filed maps in the county clerk's office, which are available online.
Section
I see no reason why we can't hold it, because the rest of the problem is what I explained a minute ago, is that 3 lots are in the name of the homeowners association, and they have a zero tax assessment on it. And my curiosity is whether all 4 lots are bound into the Stonecrest project, and that the tax assessment has been rolled onto the 1 lot, which would explain why 3 properties have a 0 assessment. The tot lot and the 2 basins have 0. That's unusual. So that's why I think research needs to be done, and it's not that hard to do.
My question is if it went into foreclosure, what kind of money are we talking about?
For the cost of the foreclosure?
Mm-hmm.
For each separate lot, you have to do a title search.
Mm-hmm.
We've contracted with the title company to do those. I believe we're getting them at about $250, $300 a pop.
Ooh.
Pardon me?
Ooh, I thought 200.
You could be right, because
Okay.
Evan Laboff of my office does those. In terms of legal fees, publication, going to judgment, could probably double that. Depends on how many you have in that particular year in REMS. If you have a lot, it's proportionate. If you have little, it's higher. My concern would be more on an environmental basis. You don't want to take land that you don't know what you're getting.
But people don't pay taxes, they could lay there and lay there. You don't have to take it to INREM.
That is absolutely true. There's no obligation to foreclose an in-rent
Exactly.
property for failure to pay taxes. And we've had this discussion years ago, where we've had properties where we just didn't take judgment because we didn't know what the properties had. In today's world, you most definitely don't want to take a property that's potentially an environmental hazard. And an environmental hazard, today's standard, is a whole lot less than what it used to be. And it carries with it a consequence. So I think at a minimum, you got to do a phase 1. I think, Mike, you would agree with that, wouldn't you?
Wouldn't take any property without a phase.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay,
if
but
looking
with
at-
a foreclosure and that sort of thing, it would cost, as well as a title search and all that jazz.
I think the foreclosure part of it, the cost, is not nearly as much as a phase 1. But you never, ever, ever want to take a property without knowing its history.
Mhm.
Because if it costs you $10,000 for a phase 1 and it reveals X, then you're not going to take that property in an interim foreclosure. You're just not going to do it. It sits there.
Now, does that go against the person who owns it, or the taxes
Well,
just accumulate, or?
The problem is, in a normal sense, Judy, when you take action against a property, you would have lien rights to the property. When you foreclose a property, you have the right to recoup in the sale of that property after you take title, your cost and fees. But the question in this case is, against what and against whom? Because if the owner of the property decides not to pay it, your recourse is against the property. And if the property has a problem and you're not going to take it, you have no recourse to recoup.
If our tax rate for Hamilton Township is 73 cents, and an assessment is $10,000, how much tax dollars are we getting? 73? $7.30? $73? Which is it? For 10,000 assessment, what are we getting? $7.30. Does that sound right? No, $73. $73, excuse me. So if it's 20,000, it's double 73. We're dealing with $146 a year in lost tax revenue to this town on a 20,000 assessment. This is less than 25. So we're dealing with less than a $200 annual tax payment coming into this entity that we're risking losing. I don't think that's a risk at all. It's going to cost us more than that just for the title search.
I thought I heard that these properties were zero assessed.
That's the other 3 lots. That's not in question. The only lot in question on that map you're looking at, Bob, is the lot 50 that has volunteer way through it.
Yeah.
But it also goes all the way out to McKee Avenue. Comes out near the pump station of the ACUA.
I see it.
Okay? So it's behind Super Wawa, it's all the way over to Fairway Drive, and then all the way out to McKee Avenue. That's Lot 50, that's the 25 acres, and the assessment is, as I said, $24,700, less than $200 a year to us. So I don't see a reason to spend $12,000 for environmental and for outbound surveys when it's part of a filed map. We shouldn't be taking it. We can't be wasting the taxpayers' money. We have no benefit from taking this piece of property.
Maybe you do, and maybe you haven't looked that far.
Yes, maybe there is some benefit.
And there is, and let me
It's
just ask.
restricted as passive recreation.
Not all of
Wait,
it.
that's the question I was going to ask.
Go ahead.
I want the solicitor.
Go ahead.
If it's restricted of passive recreation and we accept it back, can we change the use?
Whew, that's a question I can't answer sitting here.
Because that property has a section, Mike and I went to look at it during the week. To the left of the basin, it's pretty high and dry in there, and it has some real potential from a public safety point of view in terms of some of the questions could be answered that we looked at in terms of moving some of the responders to that area. So it may have some benefit there. And I think before we close the lid on this thing, I'd like to know, I mean, can we change the use? I mean, if the township took it back, could they utilize it for something like that?
I think the answer is yes, but what the procedure is, I don't know. But I'm very suspicious when a private owner says it has no value to him. I suspect there have been studies that would support that decision of a private landowner. But sitting here right now, Mr. Mayor, I can't give you an opinion. I'd be glad to research it and get back to you on it.
Eileen, did you want to make a motion?
Yeah, I wanted to make the motion to table it, and we could talk about it in the Smart Growth Committee, and we can check those resolutions.
Why can't we have the attorney?
And we can,
Why can't we have the attorney do it a lot quicker, so that we would know?
Yeah, put it in the attorney's hand.
that's fine. Bob, the filed map number I just gave to her, it's a 1998 minor subdivision filed map. I think it was 3657. It's Delilah Oaks Construction Company. That's not what this tax map, the tax map and the filed map don't match.
I have a motion on the floor that I think has been tabled, or has been seconded.
It was seconded.
Okay, and the motion was to send it to Smart Growth.
Motion to table.
And table it and send it to Smart Growth.
Okay.
The mayor has questioned whether or not it would be quicker if I were to do the analysis and report back to you. And I suppose that begs the question, would you reconsider your motion?
Of course, I will move to table to send it to the attorney.
Thank you.
Second.
Any questions or comments to the motion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
I'll report back at the next meeting.
Post haste. Thank you, everyone. And the questions are good when it comes to stuff like that.
Color pictures?
No.
You weren't given
Next
color
item on the agenda is C, orange X painted on houses. Michael?
It's not mine. It's
I know it's
Committeewoman
not
Dix.
yours, but do you want to, can we, before we get into it, why are we doing that?
The fire code, I'd rather Phil, he's sitting here, the fire code.
I figured I'd sit
provides
over
for-
here since I was going to be
There you
back for
go.
this one. Our,
Could we please just put why this is happening?
Oh,
It's
that's right.
because of a citizen's complaint on April 28th. 3 properties were identified in Harding Lakes immediately that day, and we had a smart growth meeting on April 30th, which it was discussed at that time with Judy and I and Phil Sartorio, and that is why on May 13th, when I had heard nothing back over the 2-week passage of time, I'm sure Judy heard nothing if I heard nothing, I went and got pictures taken, and we put it on the agenda to discuss, because these orange X's are making our homes and our neighborhoods look like I remember the damage at Homestead, Florida in 1992-93 after Hurricane Andrew, and I don't want to see that happen to my town. So regarding these houses in Harding Lakes, I know there's 2 on 7th Street, but those are a different situation than this.
Bill?
Certainly.
Just explain who's putting them on, what the purpose is, and what's the impact on the surrounding homes, and what authority do we have to do it?
The authority that we have to identify the houses, and the reason why it was done, is in the Property Maintenance Code adopted by the committee, specifically Section 108, which governs unsafe structures and equipment. What occurred was there are several houses throughout the township where the state of damage or neglect, there's been no response from a responsible party to repair or maintain. We've had crews go out and board them up, secure them, and put liens on them. But as a identification and warning for first responders, if they would be called out, one of the things that the code calls for is for these units to be secured and placarded so that they're aware of the conditions of the property. It was done by one of the code inspectors, based on the list that they have in their office. Some of the structures, it's obvious from the street where there's an issue. Some of them, it's in the back of the structure where they're, one of the photos you have in the back of the structure, there's actually a branch through part of the roof. A large branch went through a porch roof or something like that.
Lance Avenue. I was
Right.
there today.
Right. It was the first step in having that information available. In addition to that, they're going to be compiling that list and providing that to the dispatch office so that the information is coded into their GIS. So if a tone goes out for one of these locations, that's part of the information that they will be receiving. Again, we're trying to follow through on the ordinance. The symbol given is slightly different, is actually one from the Uniform Fire Code, rather than what our ordinance calls for, because that calls for a placard on the building that says condemned. And clearly, you know, they're not all condemned, but there's a need for notice for a first responder. That's the reason why it's been done that way.
Well, for one thing, the damage of the orange paint on the vinyl siding, I don't know how anybody's going to remove that. I don't know that these structures, and I'm specifically talking to the 3 ranchers in Harding Lakes, and I gave 2 pictures, I didn't give the picture of the third one. I don't know that these cannot be rehabilitated and put back into the housing stock. But I, for one, would not want to be sitting looking out my window and seeing an orange X every time I look out my window. There's got to be a better way to do this. This is what we talked about on April 30th, and I asked that since we now know that a notice of a foreclosure comes into the clerk's office, which is handed over to the building inspector's office, I think we need a database built with all the vacant homes that we're receiving these notices. It could be done in an Excel spreadsheet. In the blink of an eye, a spreadsheet could be built and kept updated every time another notice comes in. Takes a minute and a half to type that, just a little bit. What's the address? What's the block and lot? Something like that. It's not that big of a deal. But I know the concern in Harding Lakes. I believe it was probably March a year ago that one gentleman who's lived here for a very long time showed me 35 houses on his iPhone, the pictures he had taken of vacant houses just in Harding Lakes. I've got 4 on my side of Park Road, which is like unheard of. We could have this town looking like a checkerboard if we don't find a better way to do this. This is not acceptable. We're having a reassessment. We're lowering assessments because of the decreased values. These orange X's are going to pull the neighborhood down even more.
Mr. Mayor, could another person make a comment?
Please.
I completely agree on the aesthetic piece of the orange X's, and as a former resident of Harding Lakes, I completely understand, and Ingrid could probably attest that years back, I used to send countless pictures and emails with regard to various properties there. Because of the public safety element of this, and the law that's dictating that we need to do this for our first responders, and I think it is responsible that we do it. You know, the chief did mention the ability to put the designation, the various designations into the dispatch system, as you mentioned, Phil. And the question I think that is just on the table is, does that satisfy the ordinance or the law that's associated with needing to indicate a safe or an unsafe structure? I don't know if it specifically says that it has to be physically marked on the building, because my argument is kind of, if we just have to have an identifier, and that identifier is in the dispatch database, does that satisfy the law?
Well, the ordinance calls for a placard.
It does.
However,
And it's our ordinance.
it's our ordinance.
So we could change it.
However, in talking to, you know, we're trying to do it at a reasonable cost. That's why the orange paint. Clearly, we could get a vinyl sign.
But do we have to mark? Can we just change the ordinance to indicate that the notice will be, or the identifier will be maintained in the dispatch database? And then we kind of resolve both issues, and we maintain the public safety element.
Part of the reason for marking, though, is obvious safety. If you have an emergency crew running to this building, the chances are much greater that they'll notice a physical marking as opposed to having something on a data file.
But
Now, there may be other ways to do it that are certainly more compatible than a big orange X, but certainly there's a safety consideration here.
And that's exactly what I asked about. And the process, as I understand it, and, you know, Mike or the chief, you could, I'm sure, speak, it would be when a tone would go out for this property, for example, the alert would come up about the property. So when it's getting dispatched out, they automatically are dispatching the type of structure that it is. And I think there's like 3 or 4 designations of the type of structures.
Maybe it's possible to use a sticker that is of reflective nature.
Well, just a couple comments. I heard Phil say, I thought this was the fire code, but you're saying it's our property maintenance ordinance. So certainly the committee can decide whether you want to mark them or not. I do know that placards is a standard thing to mark an abandoned building, especially a dangerous building. But as the chief points out in his email, it also lets people that may want to do things that they're not supposed to do in those buildings know that they're vacant. So by putting it in the police computer system, you're not actually marking the building.
Exactly.
But from what I hear what Phil's saying is that since it's our ordinance, we can change it. And you might want to just go to the chief's system. But if you want to placard the building, I definitely think we want to get away from the paint and tape something on the window if we're going to do that. But it sounds to me like you have the authority to decide what you want the result to be. So, but I definitely don't think we ought to be spray painting.
The other condition is, what if there's some bums in there, you know, taking...
Vagrants, vagrants,
Well,
did you
that's
mean?
exactly why we discussed an option where you don't mark the building, but you still are able to identify it in a way that our first responders remain safe, and that's the key element here.
The only caveat that I would put on that is the reasons
They'd
for placarding a building originally. See, I thought this was the fire code, and if it's not the fire code, the reason for placarding a building is to let not just them, but the general public also know it's unsafe to go in it. So, I mean, if you don't placard it and someone goes in there, there could be a problem. See, because this isn't the fire code, this is the property maintenance code. So you may want to put something more discreet, but still a placard, but tape it on glass and still put it in the police, because then you could probably resolve both issues, one that's more discreet. Most of these houses have notices taped all over them anyway.
Exactly.
But if we had something discreet, and usually those placards are red, just so I know, because I put up a bunch of them when I was first getting started in this business. But maybe we could do some of both, you know, smaller placard taped to a window. And that would take care of putting people on notice, you don't want to go in this house, because the door could be open because somebody broke in. Next thing you know, the neighbor's walking in to see if something's wrong and they get killed, then they're going to say, well, you knew it was unsafe and you didn't
Right.
placard it. So maybe we can just tweak the ordinance a little bit and have the best of both worlds.
The picture with the boarded up door, and this is 6307 Lance. You can all see the white paper on the picture window. There's a telephone number. It says property manager for this property, and it was a 588 phone number, something like that. Has anybody besides Aline taken the time to dial up one of these phone numbers, and can't we tell them? Wouldn't it be so much more efficient and effective if we simply stood there with our township cell phone in front of that window, dialed up that phone number and say, I'm from Code Enforcement, Township of Hamilton, Mays Landing, New Jersey, and I'm reporting to you the conditions at this property right now. You could even conceivably snap a picture and email it to whoever you're talking to. And if we would do that, we would save all this certified mail and all these report writings and everything else, and we might have some effect and have it much more more quickly, I beg your pardon.
Yes and no.
I doubt that.
Chancellor Place, for example, 142 Knightsbridge Way.
Yeah, I know that.
Burnt down 3 years ago.
Sure.
They started putting it back together, and all the new wood that was put on that house is now turning black, okay?
Sure.
Because of exposure to the weather. As many times as they call the owner, they don't do anything about it. I believe it's a bank. Do we have any enforcement rights there? I thought there was some legislation.
There is, and in fact, that was...
That's the other thing we had talked
okay,
about.
Two things with that. Number one, getting to the point you were making, Ms. Dix, we still have to send the notices out. And to date, we get the list of who it is and everything else. We still have to send notices out, that we have to provide notice to them. And right now...
You're wasting your time because you're sending it to the person who abandoned the property, and they're not going to do anything.
Is it the law?
It's a law.
The law,
Okay.
If you
law
want to
is.
secure it, you got to
The rule
notify
of law
them
takes place.
to
yeah.
notify their property
We
owner.
also send notices currently when a bank takes it back or a lender takes the property back. As you said before, the notice goes to the clerk's office, copy goes down to the fire prevention. They get copied on all notices right now. Currently, there's no mechanism in place that requires or compels them to do the work. We still wind up having to board up properties, cut grass, et cetera, and lien it. With legislation that was just signed into effect on Thursday.
That bill we talked about
It's,
on April 30th?
Assembly Bill A347.
Say it again, A?
A347 was signed into law last Thursday, becomes effective July 15th. Notice still has to be sent out, 30 days provided to the lender and their representative. But the most important thing is, if they don't respond and start abating the conditions within 30 days,
They
we
get a
can issue
ticket.
summons.
They get a
And we
ticket.
can bring them to court. So we're starting to get the hammers that we need to keep after the institutions and the lending companies to start doing minimal maintenance on the properties.
Well, without changing the ordinance per se, and how many of these homes now do we have these X's? 2, 3,
No.
10?
Do you know, did you ask them to tell you?
I know Glenn had the list. I didn't get a chance to talk to him today, but I think Frank told him, stop.
Stop.
Stop, yeah. and he's been on vacation for a week, so I know that nothing's been done within the past
Roger,
10 days.
I did look at the two houses on 7th Street, and I felt we should be after Bank of America to do something with the fire damage structure, because they're going to end up with it. The other one is just going to sit there till it collapses unless we go take it down, and if we took it down, here's a Sandman question. If we demolished the house that's collapsing on 7th Street, would our lien for the demolition supersede and be paramount over the tax certificates that are held by various people?
Your lien would supersede the rights of the lender, the mortgage holder.
There isn't one.
It would be a lien on the property. And I would think, if it's declared an emergency such that it would be torn down, sitting here right now, I
Right.
think your lien would supersede anybody.
So if we had to tear it down and could sell the land to recoup the money from the lien, because that's where it would have to end up.
I'm shooting
Guessing off-
I'm shooting from the hip right now.
Understand?
I'll be glad to give you an opinion on that. I wasn't prepared to answer that question tonight.
I wasn't prepared to ask it.
But let me tell you, the rights of the certificate holder are pretty strong, but the rights of the township are pretty strong. And if you would like, at the next meeting, I'll give you an answer to the question.
Well, before we authorize any action.
Mike thinks you,
Well, no, I just want to make sure we're on the same page. This is going to cost money. This property probably isn't worth what it would cost. By the time in order to tear something down, you have to prove that it's going to collapse and is dangerous. So you
It
have to
is.
get,
You have to
If
prove
I
it, that's
may,
the point.
Mr. Mayor, I thought the topic on the agenda was orange X painted on houses, and now we're talking about demoing a house on 7th Street.
Because it has an orange X on it.
But I thought we were talking about the process of the orange X and why we're doing that.
May I ask
So,
I think that the advice of your administrator is excellent. I think that you do which Aline is suggesting by way of data. You make the sticker less intrusive, you put it on glass, and I think you accomplish two things. One, you don't invite vagrants in to take the place over. And two, you put sufficient safety guards in place where the fire, rescue, and other folks, and even the public know, entering this building is dangerous. And by doing that, you absolve yourself of pretty much all liabilities, except something that would be inherently dangerous to anybody, even with notice.
I would make the recommendation that we alter the ordinance to reflect that the process is now to put whatever it is on the window and to enter it into the dispatch database.
so
I think we need to do that.
I would move that we reconsider the ordinance and revise it in accordance with the discussions we've had today, and make the recommendations that whenever that can be done, the next 30 days in 2 meetings or whatever.
Second.
Hold on. Deputy Mayor posed a motion. It's on the floor.
Well, that was a recommendation, I think she,
I
that's
heard
fine.
it as a motion.
Yeah, it was a way
Okay.
of a motion.
Okay,
All right.
Second.
So that has to be determined before we move on.
all right, is a recommendation a motion? Is that,
I interpret it as such.
okay?
Okay, so we got a motion on the floor. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
A motion is second. Any questions or comments?
Just a quick question. I know there's a couple other things that are not in the front of my mind that are in this property maintenance code that maybe we wanted to consider changing also. So before we go,
Can we just handle this issue, because this is the one we're on?
I'm
because
talking about
this is
the
Call for
cost
the
of
motion.
amending an ordinance and advertising, and I was wondering if we couldn't identify the other couple things so we could all package it into one ordinance, one advertisement.
I think that's beyond the scope of this agenda item.
Rita, can we have a roll call, please?
Mrs. Dix?
Yes.
Ms. Gatto?
Yes.
Mr. Gishard?
Yes.
Mrs. Link?
Yes.
Mayor Silva?
Yes.
All ayes and carried.
Thank you.
Thank you.
One last question before you leave us. These properties, are we doing property maintenance on, like cutting the grass and things like that? Are we building up the liens on the property?
We may have, I would have to check and see if some of them, one of them obviously has boarded up, so.
I'm sure that sends out a message in the neighborhood too, just as the orange
We
thing.
really haven't started getting into the
Okay.
property maintenance stuff as
This
far as
one-
mowing, but I'm sure we will be soon.
Roger, this one is on the agenda under the item 8, as one of the liens, 8H.
Okay, yeah, I see that one. I remember that one. That's pretty extensive. Okay.
That's this one.
Yep.
Are you sure you don't want to stay near a mic, Phil?
You're doing all right, Phil. Don't get up. We may need
Yeah.
you again.
Stay there.
Discussions. D, amendment to the employee handbook.
Yes, sir, Mayor. As you're all aware, we just recently approved the employee handbook. There were a number of things that came up timing-wise that we'd like to include before we actually publish it. One, there's 4 items that we'd like to incorporate. One is the direct deposit provision that's allowed by the state. Of course, that's up to you to determine if you want to do that. 2, the communication media policy. We had one from the GIF that we used, and at the same time, we received one from Mr. Sandman, and his had some items in it that were not in the GIFs that I thought should be incorporated, and I'm recommending that we do that. 3, the refueling policy you already approved. We're just incorporating that in here. And 4 is an emergency response policy that is modeled after state law, and it's been approved by the ESAB. So those are the 4 changes that are in front of you.
Could we discuss the direct deposit one?
Go ahead.
How many employees do not have bank accounts? Does anybody have any idea of that answer? We have about 130 employees. How many do not have bank accounts?
I mean, who do not use direct deposit?
No. Who doesn't have a bank account? So
No
when-
bank account, period?
No bank
What
account.
difference? That's private. All we're saying is how many
Because
don't.
coincidentally, Mrs. Anderson had the same thought that I had, that some people do not have a bank account. They go to check cashing storefronts to cash their paycheck.
And pay?
Exactly, and pay a fee. I have a savings account at Ocean City Home Bank. It costs $5 a month to have it if you only have one account. That's to have a savings account. So $5 a month is a lot of money to some people. I'm
Since you
against...
pay, why don't you just deposit it into your savings account and then withdraw it?
I am against the forcing the people to have the direct deposit. There is a second item in your packet tonight on these amendments, and that is on page 3 of the amending, change number 1, change number 2, third page down. It talks about use of private email accounts for any business except receipt of payroll-related emails. So now we're going to start sending payroll business out over email. What am I supposed to do, print my pay stub? So now I'm going to use either the computer in the office, which takes 10 minutes to boot up, to walk over to the copier or the printer to print my pay stub. How much time, production-wise, will be lost by the people who want a pay stub every 2 weeks, having to take time from their desk work to get it? How about the people in Public Works? How are they going to have access to the computer during the day so they can print it on? We're not going to save any money at the end of the day.
Mr. Jacobs, how many employees do not receive direct deposit right now?
I think there's about 20 that don't. Yeah, about 2 dozen that.
And it costs us $2,500 per year to
That's the banking fees plus the labor doing the
to
checks
do
and all.
those manual 24 checks.
How much production time will we lose if all 130 now start printing their pay stubs on the company's computers and printers?
The article that you're discussing there is voluntary. If somebody wants it emailed to their house, we can email it to their house if they want, or they can get the paper stub.
How would they get the pay stub here?
The paper, same way I get
Do
it,
now.
get
Same way
mine
you get it
now.
now.
In fact, I thought they did.
That's what you get now. If you have it, you already get the pay stub. That's the same as you already have.
You get a printed copy.
We do get the pay stub. Right?
Yeah.
So that part wouldn't change, it wouldn't be
It's
coming by
voluntary.
email?
No, that's fine. Well, if you want it, you could. If you don't want to, some people don't want to use any paper. And
Like me, and I volunteered to have it come to my email.
what they want to do is they'd like to get it emailed, then they can just put it on their computer in an account. And if they ever need to look at one, they have them all lined up there, and don't have to get a paper file or anything. That's voluntary. Look,
But if you need
asked
the
to try to
paper-
find ways to save taxpayers money. This is $2,500. The state's allowing it now. It's up to you if you want to do it. If you don't want to do it,
So
All right.
currently, if you want to receive the stub, you can receive it.
Well, you
Is that
already
correct?
do, yeah, you
Yes,
already get a
we
stub,
already
you
do.
always will be able to get your
Right.
stub.
So the stub is not an issue.
No, it's just another service. If you want to go paperless, you can.
My question is, how come the bank doesn't do it for nothing, since we
Well,
have such
they used to
money?
do, when there was money in banking, they used to do it, when there was interest was 2 or 3%, you could get them to waive just about anything. But now where they want you almost to pay to put your money in their bank, they don't want to give you anything.
There's more money in
Okay, so
banking
it
than
has-
ever before, so that's not a good reason.
Yeah, tell me about it.
I don't disagree with you, but that's not what they do. They don't, there's no waiving things anymore.
Is that with all banks, or?
Yeah, pretty much. I don't know of any that,
Let me ask you,
it's one fee, you're going to pay the service fee in one thing or another.
Let me ask
The
you a
lower
question.
the lower what interest they give you on your money and give you a service or vice versa.
here's the question. Direct deposit. This change will require all employees to receive their wages via direct deposit. What happens if they don't want to read it? What's the enforcement end of it?
Well, we could actually issue debit cards too, but if someone doesn't want the direct deposit. But the enforcement is you won't get paid. The state law allows us to be mandatory, so if you decide you want to do it,
You would
they have to do
withhold
it.
somebody's check?
Probably not,
No.
but we give them a hard time about it.
Has the debit card been considered? I mean, is that a viable?
Yeah.
And do people are responsive to that? Is that satisfactory to?
Didn't check with them.
I don't
If you don't have
have
a bank
one.
account, I don't know if a debit card helps if you don't have a bank account.
Probably like a Visa gift card.
I don't know who takes them.
And if you don't have an account to direct deposit into,
Then what happens?
what happens?
Well, you have to have an account.
No, you don't, well, yeah, you have to get a
The
direct deposit.
you have to have an account, yes.
You want
Can be deposited
talk-
into any, could be deposited into anything.
Speak into the microphone.
Savings, checking.
You deposit it into my account.
Yes, there you go. I'm sorry, I forgot that.
That's not funny.
If you need an account, I'll give you
Yeah.
an account number.
The bank has given us reference to these charge cards where you actually deposit it onto a charged card every biweekly payroll, the same that the state does. The state of New Jersey issues these as well.
Does the state already do this?
The state has already done that.
Can you draw money off,
For a
so-
direct deposit, and if
Can you
don't have
draw
a-
money off the charge card?
Yes.
So instead of cashing a check or something, you could go in
Go
and
to
you want to
ATM.
draw
Mhm.
the $50,000 a week that she makes off the, right?
That's correct.
But you do require an account to do that.
Well,
All
it's a debit card.
It's like a credit card, only
Like a
has
Visa
money
gift
on
card.
it.
It's a debit card, but you still have to have an account, don't you?
No.
It's not
No.
an account now. It's
Okay,
a
well,
card.
maybe that's the answer.
Same way that unemployment, if you receive unemployment benefits, you get a card. Same way the state of New Jersey issues all their payroll.
Okay.
Okay?
I'm going to permit Mrs. Anderson, because she's got her hand up and she was the one. Go ahead, Mrs. Anderson. Come on up to the microphone.
again.
We'll raise it for you.
Just tilt it over.
My question is,
Oh, but told them.
who can use that debit card?
Anybody,
Right, so.
because you just swipe it at the Acme.
However,
It's like
it
cash.
just doesn't make any sense to me that, especially the lower paid people,
Mm-hmm.
get their money, the wife or whatever wants to go shopping, and they take the house money and whatever else. It just doesn't seem fair to me,
Agree.
just because some idiot in Trenton says you can do
I
it.
agree with you.
Do this to the employees. It's not fair and it's not right.
I 100% agree with you. I don't have a debit card, and every time they ask me, do you want one? I say no, because as long as I don't have a debit card, you're going to have a job. And this is just eliminating more jobs.
My
it's saving
my
us money,
question
that's
is,
the point.
I've been doing a little math here. Does that mean that every time someone receives a check, the bank charges $5?
Right.
Or $2.50? I think you're
It has to do with the bank
bi-weekly.
reconciliation paperwork and stuff.
Yeah.
Obviously, I'm not going for this.
It's less expensive.
It's obvious.
For us to participate in a direct deposit program than it is for people to cash their check. If you take a paper check to the bank and cash the check, it costs us more in fees than it does for if you have an automatic direct deposit. So it's.
But what if they just put it into the bank? If they deposit?
There's no fees involved for the individuals or to the service. It comes as a lump sum with our banking.
She's talking about the check.
Right.
Right, if they're cashing the check
If they're
and still-
cashing
and then
the
putting
check,
it into
then-
the bank, it doesn't matter, they're still cashing the check, they
They have
still.
to, if
They
they have
cash
to
the check.
encode a check, is what their terminology is.
Right.
They charge us for that.
And-
In direct deposit, they're not charging us to encode each check.
And so how much does that cost?
There's associated fees with everything that you do, whether it's a deposit or withdrawal, with your banking institution, without your banking institution, the fees. So this was a process to create efficiency for the township.
Okay.
In the old days, you got a money envelope with
Have a seat
cash
right
in it.
there
We could go
for
back
now.
to that.
Save yourself a trip.
Call me crazy, us young folk like to have it go right in our bank account and then get our direct deposit slip emailed.
Look at all the fuel you save driving to the bank. We're saving the
I never go to the bank.
environment, too.
I
Also
even
drive to the
mobile,
bank.
I mobile deposit my checks. I don't even go to deposit my checks. so.
Pollution.
Tremendous convenience, which people
whatever you
could
want
probably
to-
get used to fairly quickly. Is it worth considering the debit card approach, which seems to have a lot of advantages
That's
to me?
automatic, right?
Maybe
They
the
said they do it
majority.
for us.
They charge for the
I think they
debit
said they
card?
do it for us.
Drop it, it's
Off the
gone.
top of my head, I believe American Express offers the services to people.
And
If
there,
you don't have a bank account or you can't get a bank account, American Express will offer this debit card.
and there is a code associated with that, so if you lost it, someone would have to have the code also. Is that not correct?
I'm certain it's secured.
I would hope so, yes.
Can we get more information about the debit card so that the people who don't belong to this system at least have more information about it so they understand it, and then they could make a viable choice?
I have that information, but until I know who needs one, it's really difficult for me to negotiate with a banking institution. But I've already touched bases with, American Express through Bank of America, through our banking, to make sure that the service is available. And I'm certain that the service would be available to those people that could not have a bank account.
So can we contact those people that are not getting direct service now to find out if they would be happy with this approach, if they find this approach satisfactory?
Well, I'm not privy to that information. I don't even know if there is any employees that can't get bank accounts. You won't.
No, no, no,
Well, I'm not
he's
talking about
asking
can't get,
about the
that don't
card.
have, that are getting direct, that are getting by choice, that are not involved in direct deposit by choice. Maybe this would be an alternative that they would find satisfactory.
Take a survey, is that what you're saying? Survey the people like me who don't get direct deposit, and then come back with that report.
There are people who have selected not to get direct deposit. Those are the people that I think
Survey.
we're talking about. So,
Yeah.
yes.
We're talking like 20 people. I'm one, and there's another one, so there's 10% right now.
I don't think it's fair to do this without the employees knowing it.
I agree.
And then you tell them, here it is.
I agree.
That's why I was
We're not suggesting that. They're
suggesting.
suggesting that they get the information.
Right, precisely.
Look,
We identify who the
what are we
people are
asking
and
them?
get the
What
information.
I would suggest, can we pull the direct deposit from this policy and procedure, the handbook, and come back with the information for another meeting?
That's all.
And also approve the others or not approve them?
Sure. What are we supposed to be asking these employees?
If they would be open to
A debit card.
a debit
Debit
card
card.
in lieu of
A paycheck.
a paycheck.
Well, first of all, we'd be making the information available to them
Yep,
about
what
how
the
the debit
choices are.
card,
You
What are
gotta
the
give
two
them a
that are
choice.
here?
how the debit card works.
What are the two that are hearsay? Would they be interested? Because I think your answer's going to be no. Or they would have already
Then leave it
taken
alone.
advantage of it. Well, that's up to you guys.
Well, I personally am in favor of going to 100% direct deposit and saving the $2,500, but I also don't want to piss off Mrs. Anderson, so it's not worth it to me, so,
Is this influence?
so I'm okay to table it.
And I'll tell you, $2,500 sounds excessive for 24 people, or
It
20
is.
people. That's hard to believe.
All right, let's move through this then. We'll table the direct deposit, and what's your choice on 2, 3, and 4?
I would move the changes on 2, 3, and 4.
Second.
A motion is second. Any questions or
Hold on.
comments?
You've got a motion to table on the floor.
All right, yes.
Vote on that.
Okay.
Second on the
we have a
table.
second. We
Second
have a
on the
second.
table.
All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Opposed?
Move.
Motion carried.
Move 2, 3, and 4.
Second.
Motion is second. Any questions or comments? Rita, give us a voice vote on that. Roll
Mrs.
call.
Dix? Mrs. Dix?
We're voting on the 2, 3, and 4.
2, 3, and 4, correct.
Yes.
Ms. Gatto?
Yes.
Mr. Gishard?
Yes.
Mrs. Link?
Yes.
Mayor Silva?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Item E, police chief and police captain salaries. Michael?
Yes, this ordinance would increase or actually would set up for a job title change from captain to deputy chief and increase the salary from 117,800 to 127,000 a year for the deputy chief position, and it would increase the chief's salary from 121,375 to 131,000.
I have a point of order, please, Mr. Sandman. You don't like us adding to an agenda? This agenda calls this item 5E, police chief and captain's salaries. That's the reason I asked about the Rice notices. We're not going to discuss salaries. We're discussing introducing a draft ordinance that will eliminate a job and create a new title, and I don't believe this is properly agendized, if I can use that word.
I respectfully disagree with you. I think that if John Q. or Mary Q. Public were looking at this, they would understand that some action would be taken with respect to the salaries, in quote, of two positions. The fact that a part of the increase in salaries would be to change the designation of the captain to the deputy chief is not the total gravamen of what's happening here.
Is not a total what?
Gravamen. It's not the essence of what is going on. A redesignation put forth, let's say, for example, there was a motion to approve this tonight and have a public hearing at the next meeting. I think that would provide adequate notice to the public to contest the salary changes. I don't think changing a designation of the employee by title decreases that import to the public viewing this. So I think that's a collateral issue, and I think that what's happening here is properly on the table. I think that this agenda provides adequate notice as to what you may or may not vote on tonight. And the safeguard is that if you were to introduce it, there's going to be a public hearing at the next meeting.
Mayor, I did leave one thing out, or actually two
Please.
things. The chief would be getting additional responsibilities so that we're basically putting all the emergency services into one department. I did leave that out.
Right, and if I could just,
Chief,
I don't
Chief
understand.
is going to get those.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Damie, and then you can go.
I was just going to mention from a safety perspective, when we discussed this, there's a couple of things. So first of all, we do have administrative type things related to emergency services that have been coming to Mike of late. And it is, it does take up some time to, to handle them. And we kind of thought shifting that responsibility under the chief of police made sense from just an overall general oversight and management perspective. And then with regard to changing the captain to the deputy chief designation, number one, Captain Patuski has been doing an excellent job in his role and has certainly taken on more duties in that. And one of the things we discussed is if he had a deputy chief designation, that there would be certain, and I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Chief, but statutory type things that he would be able to do in your absence, if you were out of town, let's say, or something like that, that right now he cannot do under a captain's designation. So that
He
was.
wouldn't demote you if you were out of town. Okay.
So from a public safety standpoint, that was the reason we had discussed, or some of the reasons we had discussed it, and then I know administration and personnel, I think, discussed it as well.
Well, and we also know that the position of captain's going to be eliminated. Okay, so we won't have that. Obviously, when you look at the role of emergency management now, it really has been expanded. I mean, all one has to do is look at what we've been involved in over the past couple of years, and the fact that also now you have your volunteer fire departments out there that I think a lot of the handling of some of those issues can come through the emergency management coordinator, deputy chief, and it makes a lot of sense moving forward with it. So I think the ordinance on the surface, even though people don't see it, we see it every day, and we also see it when we meet with them. So there's a lot going on.
And we did, before proposing this, the administrator did, and we discussed, did go through some of the other townships and look at the salary of corresponding positions in other townships. And this is clearly, it's certainly a lot below some, it's a little bit above others, but it's clearly in a reasonable zone. And the addition of the fire chief oversight, if that's the correct designation for it, was an important change, and so there is reason for it.
It's not
Well, I
fire chief oversight.
Yeah, that's the wrong designation.
Yeah,
It's,
it's just oversight.
what is the
Administrative.
Of
administrative oversight?
Administration.
And just to answer the first question that you asked me, Ms. Dix, about a rice notice. To my understanding, the general tenor of a rice notice is that when you're going to discuss someone's elements of employment in an executive session, a rice notice gives that individual the right to opt out of it by saying, no, I want it heard into a public session. So it's really not relevant to what's happening here.
I intend to ask at the beginning of every meeting whether rice notices have been issued. My attorney, Eileen Musket, asked Mr. Birchmeyer, how are we sitting up here supposed to know who has a rice notice if we're never told? So if anybody's going to get accused of violating a rice notice, you can accuse all you want, but if you have no knowledge that there were rice notices out there, how are we supposed to know? The only way I'm going to know, and I had called you in October about my concern about whether we were handling rice notices properly. I cited a rice notice from another town that was issued by a city clerk. Charles Kane, when he sat here, thought rice notices were issued by the Township Committee. So there's 3 different forums where rice notices seem to be coming out of, and the knowledge is the power. We can all violate things if we are not made aware. And there's never been a notice to me in now, 24 and 5, 29 months of sitting up here. I've never seen a memo to say ABCD job titles have had rice notices issued. It's just a formality to protect myself.
To
Well,
protect yourself, may I, Mr. Solicitor? She has an avenue to utilize. She can go through Mr. Philip Satorio and ask that question. He would be pleased. You can't just sit home alone and conjure up this stuff without talking to anybody. There's actually a balance for you to achieve when you deal with Mr. Satorio. You can ask him the question, he'll answer it. Okay? Just like each and every one of us goes and sits down independently with Mr. Jacobs, and we review the agenda so we know what's on it. Generally, those questions could be answered ahead of time, and you could eliminate this type of a dialogue before the public.
Regarding the ordinance, I opposed when the captain and OEM coordinator titles were added together. I wasn't able to find that on the 2013 minutes. I don't know why I just wasn't coming up with it. Again, in this case, you're keeping OEM as part of a job title. This OEM appointment is a 3-year term. It expires December 31 of 2015, and whoever is sitting in the mayor's seat at reorg of 2016 will get to appoint the OEM coordinator at that time. If there is a change of mayorship and a change of OEM, we're going to be amending ordinances again. I just see it as a waste of money.
Could I comment on that? Because that's not correct. The job title is Deputy Chief of, well, I'm sorry, doing it backwards. The job title is Deputy Chief of Police. The whereases confirm, just so it's documented for the history, that they are combined at present. But the job title is Deputy Chief of Police.
Right, and we did,
That's not what I'm seeing in the second whereas clause.
I said in the whereas, that's the document so that we know they're currently combined. But if you look down in the ordinance, which is what you're going to vote on, Deputy Chief of Police in the Police Department.
I thought he just explained that.
To
it's,
create the position of Deputy Chief of Police / OEM Coordinator, and that upon promotion, delete the position Captain of Police. Second whereas clause.
I just explained it.
he's saying that the ordinance would be written, and it's item 2 in the ordinance, to amend the chart of organization by adding the following full-time position, Deputy Chief of Police in the Police Department. And then the same thing for item 3, in terms of the elimination of the Captain of Police position. What he's saying in
For history, they're not.
the item above is simply a memorialization of what is happening today. It says, in the best interest of the township, to create the position of deputy chief / saying he is the OEM coordinator right now. That's what I think you're intending on saying.
Exactly what I'm saying. The
Right.
OEM coordinator part. Oh, geez, I'm doing it backwards. I'm used to.
Like, he holds
Old
two
Bridge is just
titles.
opposite. It's just explaining what's going on currently, but whereases aren't part of the ordinance. They're not in the
So I don't
ordinance. They don't
think-
go in the code, so it's.
If-
All right. So if this is introduced, we're talking about a $9,200 raise? You said $117,800, and this says $127,000? So $9,200 raise to be promoted to Deputy Chief of Police.
And from a financial standpoint, we would still be below salary and wage budgeted items.
The recent retirements are going to provide breakage in the police salary and wage line item, so it would be funded out of that, this year and next year, same.
I make a motion to introduce.
I second it.
A motion is seconded. Are there any other questions or comments? Rita, may we have a roll call, please?
Mrs. Dix?
No.
Ms. Gatto?
Yes.
Mr. Gishard?
Yes.
Mrs. Link?
Yes.
Mayor Silva?
Yes.
4-1. The ordinance is introduced. It'll be introduced as ordinance number 1770. It will be published on May the 21st in the Atlantic County Record. Public hearing, June 2nd. Copies available to the public beginning tomorrow morning. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. 5F, proposed resolution of support of A 1021 requiring certain energy tax receipts to be paid directly to municipalities. Mr. Gishard asked to have this on the agenda, and Rodney, do you just wanted to go over that letter, or do you want to?
Well, basically, we have talked about this either singly or as a group before, and I think most of you are aware of the fact that at one time, I guess maybe fiscal year 2008 and before, the townships used to collect energy receipts from the utilities, and it was a way of sort of paying back for the services the township provides and so on and so forth. That was a fairly substantial part of our budgets, and that was taken away. This proposed bill would, first of all, require the revenues from the energy receipts go directly to municipalities with an adjustment for inflation. Second, the bill requires the state to restore over the next 5 years approximately $331 million in reductions in municipal aid that occurred in fiscal years 2008, 2010, and 2011. In sum, this bill would provide an estimated $2,915,042 in direct property tax relief to your residents in the first year of enactment. So I think it's something which is certainly in our favor. What was done to us may have helped keep the state expenses or the state revenue up, but it certainly hurt us. And I think it's fair, I think most of us think it's fair that that money be reimbursed. Now, we can ask for it, that doesn't mean we'll get it.
Shouldn't even be taken, really, but.
That's right. Give us back what we have.
That's right, give us back what we have.
So,
Yeah, I
does that
believe,
mean-
Rodney, we were very adamant when we were considering running that we wanted to try to accomplish this, and this would be fantastic if it comes through. It will really help us a lot.
Absolutely. Now, the Assemblyman.
Resolution.
Yeah, I'd like to propose that we accept the resolution.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second supporting A 1021. Any questions or comments? Rita, please.
Mrs. Dix?
Yes.
Ms. Gatto?
Yes.
Mr. Gishard?
Yes.
Mrs. Link?
Yes,
Mayor Silva?
Yes.
All ayes and adopted.
Thank you. Thanks, Rod.
Just one brief comment. This is supported by both Assemblymen, so I think it certainly has support.
Mazzio and Brown.
Yeah.
Okay,
yes.
it's good to know.
Great.
Okay, number 6, public hearing adoption of ordinances. A, 1769, 2014, amending Chapter 301, Article 1 of the Township Code to establish a no parking zone on a portion of Tyrants Drive. It's over in Victoria Crossing.
This would be, no parking shall be permitted on the 2 interior curved areas of Tryons Drive from the apex of the curve for 60 feet in either direction. There shall also be no parking allowed on either side of Tryons Drive for 25 feet from each intersection with Victoria Drive. And a lot of this was driven by the fact that we can't fit a fire engine or
To make the turn.
an ambulance truck down those curves very easily right now.
on either
Okay,
side.
this is a public hearing. Does anyone in the public wish to speak on this?
Where's our Tryons Drive at?
Victoria Crossing.
Okay.
If you were to come in off of West Jersey, you go down past the rec field, it will be the first street on your left. You go in, it's a horseshoe street, and the way they're referring to it is a lot of times, as the deputy mayor said, trying to get a larger type emergency vehicle through there. If cars are parked, they can't make that turn.
Yeah.
Okay? Thank you. Still a public hearing. Anyone in the public wish to comment?
Move to close the public portion.
Second.
Motion is second. Any questions or comments on it? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Move to adopt 1769, 2014.
Second.
The motion is second. Any questions on that motion? Rita?
Mrs. Dix?
Yes.
Ms. Gatto?
Yes.
Mr. Gishard?
Yes.
Mrs. Link?
Yes,
Mayor Silva?
Yes.
All ayes and adopted.
Thank you. Number 7, award of contracts. Award bid number 2014-04, 2014 road program to Arawak Paving Company, Inc., with a base bid in the amount of $524,600 as recommended by Robert J. Smith III, Township Engineer, on May 8, 2014.
So moved.
Second.
Motion is second. Any questions or comments on the motion? Rita, please.
Mrs. Dix?
Yes.
Ms. Gatto?
Yes.
Mr. Gishard?
Yes.
Mrs. Link?
yes,
Mayor Silva?
Yes.
All ayes and adopted.
Thank you. B, award bid number 2014-06, Leapy Track Drainage Basin Remediation to Command Company, Inc., with a bid in the amount of $280,900 as recommended by Robert J. Smith III on May 14, 2014.
So moved.
Second.
Question.
Go ahead, Aileen.
What is the publication date of the passage of the bond ordinance? 1766 was approved April 21. What's the publication date?
That was April 21st, a Monday?
I can't hear the answer. I asked the publication date.
If that was a Monday, then it would have been 2 days later, Atlantic
So
County Record.
it went in?
I don't have that one with me.
Cindy, are you saying April 23rd? The publication date is what I'm asking. I'm asking if it was published on April 23rd.
I believe the publication date, I don't know the publication date, but I count 20 days backwards, it's May 13th, when it's public hearing, after publication.
Okay,
I specifically made sure.
okay.
Any other questions?
No.
Rita?
Yes. We have a motion
Who
and a
made it?
second.
Who
Second
seconded
was
it?
made by Rodney Gishard.
Okay.
Mrs. Dix?
Yes.
Ms. Gatto?
Yes.
Mr. Gishard?
Yes.
Mrs. Link?
yes,
Mayor Silva?
Yes.
All ayes and adopted.
The consent agenda.
Items, I make a motion for items 8A with 1 through 3 from the addition through J.
We have an issue on, there's no Second Avenue. Could we talk about that?
Well, we have a motion on the table, so before we can talk about it, we need a second.
Have a motion and a second. Question, I'll second it. Have a motion and a second. Any questions?
Second Avenue is at Route 54. You can see it on your map. Second Avenue in Hamilton Township is Blueberry. So in a technical way, our street is Blueberry, not Second Avenue.
Well, how was the request made?
It was for Second Avenue, but that's in Hamilton. I have it highlighted on my list.
It says Blueberry Road, parentheses, Second Avenue, and Weymouth Road in the letter.
What are you looking at? I'm looking at
I'm
this.
looking at the letter in our packet.
I'm looking at this.
Keep going a couple pages. From Stephen Del Monte, Race Director.
See it, Aileen?
I see it, yes.
You all
Okay.
right with that now?
Yeah, it's okay now.
Very good. Okay, I have a motion on the table and a second. Any questions or comments to the motion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Approvals. Number 2, March 13, 2014, executive session.
So moved.
I'll second it. A motion is second. Any questions or comments? Can I have a roll call, Rita?
Sure. Mrs. Dix?
Yes.
Ms. Gatto?
Yes.
Mr. Gishard?
Yes.
Mrs. Link?
Yes.
Mayor Silva?
Yes.
All ayes and adopted.
Good. Number 3, May 2nd, 2013, special meeting, public session.
So moved.
Second.
Motion is second. Any questions or comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Number 4, May 12th, 2014, special meeting, public session.
So moved.
Second.
Motion is second. Any questions or comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Motion carries. B, payroll and bills. Bill list totaling $899,236.29.
So moved.
Second.
A motion is second. Questions or comments? Rita, roll call, please.
Mrs. Dix?
Yes.
Ms. Gatto?
Yes.
Mr. Gishard?
Yes.
Mrs. Link?
Yes.
Mayor Silva?
Yes.
All ayes and adopted.
Okay, number 10, personnel. Authorization to advertise for a part-time clerk in community development housing.
So moved.
Is this a replacement?
Yes.
Second.
The motion is second. Questions or comments? Rita, please.
Mrs. Dix?
Yes.
Ms. Gatto?
Yes.
Mr. Gishard?
Yes.
Mrs. Link?
Yes.
Mayor Silva?
Yes.
All ayes and adopted.
Good. B, authorize the hiring of the Cove, 2014 Cove staff. Bob, can I take them?
You can unless somebody has an objection.
Okay, if I move items B1 through 7.
I'll second it. The motion is second. Any questions or comments?
Yeah, Rodney and I discussed this in Quality of Life Committee on April 30th. I distributed documents that we have had for a couple years from our neighbors to the north, Egg Harbor City, and the standards and operating procedures for the operation of their public beach. And I suggested that we need to come up with similar regulations just for the operation of our swimming beach. And I had hoped that we would get back from staff recommended operating procedures. And the comment was made that we have a personnel policy, but a personnel policy doesn't specifically give, just like the police department has SOP for their operating procedures, I believe we need it at the Cove. Such things as how electronic communications are handled throughout the day. They have walkie-talkies. Such things as promptness to work, to report to work. And without going further, I would like to see something for us to adopt at the next meeting, even if it's using some of what Egg Harbor City had in theirs. It's a very necessary thing to do, and I think that I made that very clear in the private meeting.
All due respect, Mr. Mayor, the motion and the second
I know,
is on the
that's what I'm waiting
hiring
for.
of Cove staff.
I know. I have a motion and a second. Any other questions or comments to the motion? Rita, can we have a roll call, please?
Yes. Mrs. Dix?
Reluctantly, yes.
Ms. Gatto?
Yes.
Mr. Gishard?
Yes.
Mrs. Link?
Yes.
Mayor Silva?
Yes.
All ayes and adopted.
Good. Before I go to C, Michael, can we look into her request about the policy procedures at the Cove? And see if we have an updated one or something that will at least address some of the things that Committee Woman Dix is...
We already had one, but I'll check.
Would you please? Okay, thank you.
Perhaps you can get the handout that was given to Brett and to Ingrid. You still have it, Ingrid? Yes?
Looked for it, I don't believe that I received it, so perhaps we have another copy.
All right, well, we handed it out at the table, so I'll try to get you another one.
Okay. 10C, appointment to fill the Veterans Advisory Board vacancy, filling the unexpired term of Russell Bongiovanni Sr. Term expires December the 31st, 2014.
Mr. Mayor, I have a nomination for that vacancy,
Okay.
and the nomination is Mr. Bob Campbell. As you know, he's been on that VAB for a large number of years. He has quite a bit of experience, and I think right now, that experience could be used. This is an unexpired term which is only until the end of the year, and I think during that period of time, given the experience levels of many of the people, it would be helpful to have his services on board. So that's my recommendation.
I have a recommendation. Do I have a second?
So I second the motion.
The motion is second. Any questions or comments to the recommendation? Rita,
I'm going to be voting no. I want to put
Wait
it on
till
the
I
record.
call for it, please. and
I
then
wanted
you-
to put on the record what,
Well,
under
when we
comment.
get to you, you can put it. Rita,
Thank
can we
you.
please have a roll call?
Yes. Mrs. Dix?
The answer is no, and the reason is that this didn't have to come up as a late agenda item. If it had been on the regular list, I could have looked at the other candidates who are on our list of applicants waiting to be appointed to boards and had some input into the choice.
Thank you.
With regard to that, quite frankly, I'm aware of one other candidate that appeared today, and I really haven't even seen the write-up yet. Are there others? Do we have other candidates?
We weren't aware, and I think, look, you and I sit there, I mean, I'm not any liaison or anything, but I haven't seen any.
No,
And
I
the
haven't
other one I
seen
saw
any
today
yet.
was what came in, so. Go ahead, Rita, you wrote it. Aileen, who's next?
Ms. Gatto?
I'm going to abstain for the same reasons that Ms. Dix mentioned.
Mr. Gishard?
Yes.
Mrs. Link?
Yes, I feel Bob will do a very enthusiastic job, as he always done for the veteran, and he's always tried to make it apolitical. And he did a great job for 15 years. I think he deserves to be considered for 6 months.
Mayor Silva?
Yes.
Motion carries 3 yes, 1 no, 1 abstention.
And if I might be clear, I have not seen a list, I'm not aware of a list of candidates. If I had, then, we'd see it, but I haven't seen that. I know of, I understand it was one person today, and I haven't even seen that. But I do know of the person I recommended, and I think it's a positive recommendation.
I think it was emailed to us like in December. It's every single board, every single applicant and every single board.
Yeah, but you have to understand, Aileen, that's one thing that the Veterans Advisory Board has always been careful about. They need people to serve there. If they had them, they would have filled those vacancies. I don't think I've seen any. In fact, there was a shortage at one time.
I didn't look.
That's
In
right.
fact, wasn't there just an advertisement recently, Mr.
Yes,
Gishard?
we've had it out on the board, on the
Right.
electronic bulletin board, and
Believe me, any of them come in when there's a vacancy, they'll put them up, and I'm sure it'll follow the course, so.
and those applications you're talking about, those are general applications which cover a number of positions.
All right. Item 10D, approve Robert Montalvo as full-time temporary labor at $15 per hour effective June 2nd, 2014, not to exceed 11 months in duration.
So moved.
Second.
And this is a
The painter.
kind of replacement of
It's
the painter.
Same
Yeah,
painter
Same
coming
painter.
back to finish up.
not an ad, I guess, is
Oh,
the
it's
The
not.
gentleman that's done all of this great painting in here, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Have a motion and a second. Any questions or comments? Rita?
Mrs. Dix?
Yes.
Ms. Gatto?
Yes.
Mr. Gishard?
Yes.
Mrs. Link?
Yes.
Mayor Silva?
Yes.
All ayes and adopted.
Thank you. Reports, Mr. Administrator.
Nothing to add to the written report.
Mr. Solicitor.
I have one thing to report. As you know, last year, my law firm retained a Hamilton Township native, a law student named Billy Nieves, and he
Yes.
came to a number of our meetings. I'm pleased to announce that once again, our commitment to Hamilton Township, we have retained as our law clerk a Hamilton Township young lady by the name of Allison Nichols,
That's great.
whose father sat on this dais for many years, and hopefully she'll be able to attend some of our meetings and be involved with Hamilton Township.
Good. Coming full
By
circle.
the way, you were congratulated earlier about your daughter. She just graduated college, right?
She did. I
GW.
spent the weekend in Washington DC attending the George Washington University graduation, and it was an honor because George Washington University is the only university who is permitted to conduct their graduation ceremonies on the National Mall,
Oh, wow.
and it was very exciting.
Lot
And
of
thank you
people-
for your
lot of people.
congratulations. A very lot of people.
Yeah, it's on Facebook, thanks to Paul Junta, he was there too.
Is that right?
So in the crowd, we couldn't see you waving?
No.
No.
I guess if
Okay.
the sun going off my bald head was
Oh.
making the planes move around, you know?
A good commencement speech?
It's unbelievable.
Mr. Smith?
I have a question for Bob. Actually, I have two
Well,
questions.
Can Bob first? Go ahead, Bob.
I have nothing to add to my written
Okay,
report,
now you
Mayor.
go, please.
Wrong Bob. I meant Sandman.
Oh, go ahead. I'll back up.
Bob, ESAB Board, I tried to attend the meeting because I wanted to hear about the Fairways fire, and I was told I could not attend because it was not open to the public, and if I did enter, it would be 3 committee people in the same room, and that would be a violation.
Sunshine.
In order, sunshine law violation. In order not to be argumentative, I said I'll listen from across the hall. My point to you is, you sit over here for Industrial Commission, and 3 people have been in this room at the Industrial Commission. Is the ESAB Board open to the public? Could I have attended as 3 people attend other public meetings? They're
Well,
not interacting.
you started the question by saying that the ESAB board was not public.
I was told that it wasn't. I believe it is.
She was told it was not a publicly advertised
That's what
meeting.
she was told.
Because it's an advisory board. It is not a decision-making board.
It is always bad form to have a quorum present at anything, with the exception of a political caucus and/or a public meeting where the 3 members of the Township Committee meetings, members, would not be conducting the business of the township. There's an argument that can be made that if the ESAB meeting was not public, it could be involving the business of the township. Notice I said could. I don't like to shoot from the hip, and I know that you gave me an email on this, but I was not prepared to give it an opinion. But if you're asking me if I were there, what I would have suggested to you is to one of you, please separate. The appearance sometimes is worse than reality. And if ESAB is conducting the township business, and it's not a public meeting, it's not a good idea from a public perception point of view. Whether or not that's a technical violation of the Sunshine Act, I would be more than happy to research for you. But if I were hit with that at a meeting, and I've attended those meetings, and not prepared by way of research, I would have suggested just what you did.
Go across the hall.
Yeah.
All right.
Also,
Now, but if you want my legal opinion on that, I'm telling you from my gut,
I know.
I'd be glad to give it to you.
It only happened the one time because I wanted to hear the report to do with what happened after the fire, so it won't happen again. The second question I have is maybe a little easier for you. Can policy be adopted that overrules an ordinance?
Whew. There's treatises written on that subject.
Treat us with it.
Treatising meaning volumes of legal work. It's so fact-specific. As a general matter, an ordinance is an action of legislation of the legislative body being the Township Committee. policy can be created administratively sometimes. It would be impossible for me to answer that question right now.
All right, I'll make it very specific and very simple. When the new policy manual was adopted April 7th, and regretfully, I missed the meeting because I went away for my birthday, the vacation allotments were rolled back to pre-2008 levels. I was so proud of this Township Committee in 2008 when they did the salary and wage ordinance and they changed. I was proud of the fact that so much public business was discussed in public. One of the things that was changed was vacation allotments for people hired after January 1 of 2009. So that is set by ordinance. It has been done away with by adopting a policy. So the question needs to be answered, and especially before the handbook is printed, which way is it? There's no deciding whether we're going to pay you for a legal opinion. We're going to have one because it affects the policy manual.
Your question is similar to saying to me, what does equal protection mean? And I could sit here for 3.5 days and tell you what case law says about equal protection. And in each and every one of those cases, it depends on the facts. For example, there are ordinances that have been adopted in my tenure here, which permits administration to make adjustments. The ordinance envisions that would happen. Salary ranges, in fact, it happened tonight. So there is administrative adjustments provided for in the law. And that's just one example. Now, I don't mind being asked questions that I don't know ahead of time. I don't mind it, because I'll give you the best answer I can. It certainly goes beyond the role of my report as solicitor, but you asked the question. It can't be answered in a vacuum.
I understand that.
And what you're asking me is a question that's so broad that even if you said to me, research it and give me an answer, that would cost a lot of time and a lot of money.
What's so hard about looking at an ordinance that was adopted in 2008 and a policy that was adopted on April 7th, 2014, and tell me which one is the law of the town?
I can do that.
That's my question. Because if the ordinance of 2008 is the law of the town, then the policy that was adopted has to reflect the law, or we have to do a new ordinance to roll back and give more vacation time.
And as I said, I shall never shy away from a question.
I know you won't.
But the proper way to do that is in advance of a meeting, to be fair to me, because I don't want to sit here and say, again, I'll research it for you and give you an answer, because it makes me look foolish. And I don't like looking foolish.
You don't look foolish. You have been tied up with family business, pride in your daughter's college graduation, which I read on the internet. I didn't know Katie had already done 4 years. I didn't reach out because I knew you were in Washington, because I read it on Facebook. So that's the only reason you didn't get a heads up. I certainly gave you a heads up on the ESAB because I sat in the room when I couldn't go in. I sent you an email immediately. But that's why I didn't give you any kind of a contact over the weekend.
Eileen, I appreciate those comments, I truly do.
And you understand, it's heartfelt and it's the truth.
And I get that, but I sit here as your lawyer. Regardless of what's going on in my life, good or bad, my duty is to you.
No, not that time.
And if I know in advance what the question is, I can come before you and say to all of you, here's the answer. And that's the way I do things. In the concept of giving a report from the solicitor's point of view, I could tell you what's going on with the tax appeals, I could tell you what's going on with the NREMs, but you're all kept abreast of that in writing. So I regret to say once again, I'm not in a position to answer your question.
But we need to get the answer.
Aileen, please. Do you think after, you were at the last committee meeting we had? The Fairways people were in the audience?
Yes.
Did we not talk to them? Didn't we have an open discussion? Didn't we say that the several of the board members would be coming to the SAB board meeting? What makes you think that we would sit here and I wouldn't, or Amy wouldn't, as the public safety liaisons, and give committee and the public an update on that meeting.
Don't know why we're going to spend so much money
We would gladly give it, because it's all positive, and even if it wasn't, we would give it. It just seems that we take a lot of time trying to get into this stuff, when so much of it just
Mayor,
could be handled.
I just need to say this, that I am so sensitive about how sensitive you all are of saving cost. And that's why I try to do things as quickly as possible, but thoroughly. The process that you have in having you report to Phil and the rest of you report to Mike, I think would answer that question from Mike in less than a minute.
He was at the meeting.
Well, and just
I
from
mean,
his...
that ordinance was rescinded according to Mike, he just told me.
Drafted the ordinance that rescinded that ordinance and put everything in the policy manual. And the committee voted on it.
And just as a point of order, Mr. Mayor, I thought that we only authorized the solicitor to do work when either the five of us make a motion on it here, or if it is of an urgent or life-shattering nature and, you know, Mike or the mayor needs to reach out. That is what I thought our process was with regard to asking the solicitor to conduct work that will cost the taxpayers money.
And we never changed from that. That question, Aileen, could have been asked of Phil, and it could have been dealt with in time. It's just unfortunate the way it's going. Really is. It seems that we're turning the clock backwards.
A lot of money.
Are you finished with your report?
I was just asking Bob the question.
Yeah, but you were just committee reports. You occupied a little bit of time, so if you
No,
want to
I
continue.
don't have anything else to add, but I would like to know the ordinance number so I can look it up. Do we know off the top of anybody's head?
I think you should direct that question to Phil.
Okay.
Mr. Gouchard.
Just a few items. One, I did attend the Stockton Center on Successful Aging. They had a festival, which I mentioned at the last meeting, on the 13th, I believe, and it was very interesting. There is such a center, and for any of you who might be interested in what they have to offer, it's worth considering. It is on the web. I forgot what date it was, but we recently had a meeting, it's the administrator, myself, and several of the recreation heads to discuss the status of our recreation program here and what the plans were. And I think it was a very successful meeting. We got some feedback from them, and I think they were happy with what they heard, and we are going to make some minor modifications to what has been planned, so that went well. I got a call from the library, and for any of you who might be interested, a green team, they're calling it, is being established, and this is going to look at sustainability New Jersey. There's a program that's directed toward green energy and other programs to sustain New Jersey, and there's an interest in getting together to discuss this. I know that Ingrid Perez has been involved in this in the past. But they're meeting on the 29th at 5:30, so anybody's interested, I plan to be there, and might be something of interest to some of you. And, yeah, I guess that's all I had, or I can't read the last item, that's all.
It's not my writing, so. Judy?
We call you doctor.
Does that successful aging, does it include bike riding and roller skating?
That's part of it, yeah.
Okay. This is somewhat on a personal basis. Our figure skating team at Young Skating Center went to states a week ago and captured 4 titles, and they will go on to regionals in Delran, New Jersey, which we have local people skating as well as people from Galloway, Egg Harbor City, and so on. I'd also like to congratulate the POW and a successful recital that they had on Sunday.
Little cuties.
And I think it's amazing. I just really think it's great. So that's about it.
Good organization. Yes, thank you, Judy. Deputy Mayor?
All right, well, I was intending on giving an update from the ESAB meeting as the public safety liaison. There was no quote-unquote post-fire report. The president of the resident association at the Fairways and another gentleman were the only two members of the Fairways who attended the meeting, and basically came with just a couple of process issues with regard to response and things like that. The one main question was with regard to mutual aid. So in the case of the Fairways fire, Cardiff happened to have showed up first. And they wanted to know why. So what we discussed was that each fire department has a mutual aid plan. So each chief sits down and assesses what other emergency responding entities are in their vicinity and how close are they, what's the mileage, that kind of thing. And they set up a plan that is coordinated with dispatch and the police department, and then also among the other chiefs, not only within our departments, but with the surrounding area chiefs, to say, if something happens in this area of town, here's who's going to get toned out and in what order. The other thing we talked about was depending on the time of day, because we are all volunteer departments, and most times volunteers are at work during the day. Additional number of departments may get toned out in the hopes of getting the needed response in the timely response time. That's a little bit different at night, with the assumption, again, that people are home. So we talked about the mutual aid, and their other actual question was more focused around ambulance response than it was actually fire trucks. And we talked about how our ambulance squad on Route 50 is the entity that is toned out first. But again, there are also mutual aid agreements with surrounding ambulance companies, again, based on where you are in the township of who gets toned out in what order. And it's also prioritized by what's happening in the town. So if you're getting toned out for a heart attack or something of that nature, that might take precedent in terms of response time over, I couldn't even venture to say something else, but a paper cut, let's say. So there are various, policies, operating procedures about who gets toned when and where for both the fire companies and the ambulance squad. That was really the crux of the conversation. The residents didn't realize that the fire departments don't also have ambulance squads with them, that we were different entities. So we brought up that information. There really was no questions asked with regard to water or anything of that nature. However, Mr. Blankenship was there to answer any questions if there were any, and he did explain and confirm that all of the township processes were being followed for the Fairways fire, because that was a question, and all of our maps and things like that did indicate that water levels were where they needed to be in terms of in the tower, as water was being taken out of hydrants or put into tankers, things like that. And then also mentioned some discussions going on with the property manager there and what the Fairways community needs to do in terms of managing that private water flow system in their area. So I think it was a really good discussion. Again, it really focused on mutual aid, again, more heavily on the ambulance side of the house than fire trucks. As an aging population, of course, that was one of their big concerns. And then we also talked about just some other things in terms of access roads and looking at some things there. They asked about, why don't we have a department, a substation for the fire department or an ambulance squad on that side of the town. And we did explain that it is something that we continue to look for. But we also talked about mapping out where volunteers are coming from. So the Cologne membership from the fire department, they have actually plotted out, generally comes from either the Cologne or the downtown area. So for them to respond to the firehouse where it's situated now is actually faster for them to go there, hop in a gigantic fire truck with flashing lights and sirens and barrel through 322 to get down to the fire, than for them all to individually try to go through 322 with their blue light and get to a substation out there and then get to a fire. So it was very interesting conversation, and just all the different things that all of our various chiefs have to consider when they're planning out response times and processes.
The other good thing about it was they came there very open.
Mm-hmm.
And what they really wanted to do was to dispel rumors. And obviously, in their communities, rumors fly very quickly. And it was interesting to hear them speak about some of the issues that they have in their neighborhood. The one gentleman that was there, he said, sometimes I'm in my shower all soaped up and we don't have enough water flow to rinse the soap off me. So obviously, they have issues they have to look at in their water connection flow and throughout the subdivision. I think Amy brought up a good point. They were concerned about the other issues of, now that Artist Walk is being built, I think there's going to, Bob, did you mention it to me? There was going to be, or Phil, an access road going from Artist Walk into
Yes.
the back of...
To Knollwood.
Into the back of the fairways. And that's why we mentioned earlier about that property. In the event that ever becomes a reality, that on Volunteer Way, if that acreage that the developer wants to turn back over to the township, it could or could not have significance for any of the volunteers there. We did agree to come back in a couple of months, Amy and I, and we'll attend one of their meetings in July and talk to them again. So that pretty much was...
Yeah, and they, we're going to have the fire chief as well as the rescue chief attend their meeting, just again to provide education to those residents and allow them the opportunity to ask questions, things like that. So I thought it was a very productive meeting.
Was good meetings.
Yeah. That's it from ESAB. Just a couple of other things. I wanted to congratulate Lieutenant Cooker officially on his retirement on May 30th, but his last day of work was May 15th. And if you are on our Township of Hamilton Police Department Facebook page, you'll see the picture of him walking out of the building, surrounded by his coworkers, which I thought was really awesome that you guys do that. So just want to wish Lieutenant Cooker a very happy retirement. And then also an advertisement for the Cologne Fire Department barbecue, chicken barbecue, world famous if you don't already know. It will be on June 7th, beginning at 12 noon. And they look forward to seeing everybody there. And that's it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
We all know that Rodney likes to ride his bicycle a lot, and you have days you ride, what, 75
100?
miles? 50?
100?
Well, it hasn't been
Depends
that
on if your
frequent
legs are moving, right?
Right.
Found out my youngest son, who happens to be a police officer in Mullica, he did the Unity Tour. He rode all the way down to Washington. And I said, you must have been talking to Rodney, because he would encourage anybody to get on a bicycle to ride. So, but I was pretty proud of him and the number of policemen that make that ride. He said it's quite a historic thing, and it's great to see the camaraderie and the reception they receive when they ride into Washington, D.C. So I was proud of him and the rest of the police who went on it. So with that, I'll open it up to the public. Anyone in the public? Oh, before I forget, one more comment. Roger, we had hoped at this meeting we would have the Wheaton people here.
Yes.
They were due,
They actually did some cleanup this past week.
they did clean up,
Yes, they did.
thanks to Phil.
Right.
Because Phil, and when are they coming, Phil?
Right now, we're looking to get them in for the middle of June. We'll keep the committee posted.
In terms of a presentation about the,
Presentation of what's going to go on there, and we did go down after your comments at the last meeting and look around.
My biggest thing is that they're not going to do anything with the property in the near future. My thing is, why couldn't they put grass there, put some picnic benches? At least make it- I'm sorry.
It's all right, Roger.
The other Roger didn't call you up appropriately, so it's not your fault.
Lecture. It's all right. I'm sorry, Raj. She's still teaching me.
If they're not going to develop the property in the near future, why can't they just put grass where the part of the buildings that they tore down, to at least make it a little bit more presentable?
And I think we're
Because
gonna,
that is like an entrance to our town.
Yes, you're exactly right. Good, Phil. What were we going to say?
The primary reason why they've left the foundations and the concrete, the floor area for the prior structures, is so that they can come back and rebuild there. Under the state regulations, if they would have totally cleared and regraded it,
Yeah, but
they would have lost
under
all.
EPA rule, when there's a factory, they had to dig the ground up to do research.
They've done their phase, actually, the phase one and the environmental work was done by the prior property owners, so that's been taken care of, and it's being done on an ongoing basis by them. But again, in order to preserve their rights to come back and rebuild where those building structures were, they had to leave the foundations. Otherwise, they would have, they would have much rather cleared and graded it over. But under the current coastal rules, current Pinelands rules, if that concrete was removed, the development potential for those portions of the site would have been eliminated.
Yeah, well, it was Cotton Mill Associates.
Yeah.
They have deplorable properties all through New Jersey, Westmont area, Clubfire, and things like that. And, me personally, I think the company's a scam. I think they have no intention of doing anything with it.
we'll know that when we,
In fact, be in the audience, and we'll try to hold them to let some of the people, if it doesn't present any real difficult issues, to talk to them.
Sure.
I think they should feel how the neighborhood feels. I mean, that's important if you're going to develop in an area there.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, Roger, we don't know one another, but for your protection, the statements that you just made were entirely your opinion, correct? They were
No.
not, they were not
Actually,
statements of
my
fact.
boss had a shop next to in Westmont. Same thing
Now
happened,
listen,
fire
listen to me.
happened.
Listen to me very carefully. I'm doing you a huge favor. What you said was not a statement of fact, it was a statement of your opinion, right?
Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
But as I say, if you do research on the company, it does have other properties that are deplorable. They never do anything with them.
Roger, he's trying to protect you, so stop. Thank you.
Have a good night.
Okay,
Thanks, Raj.
Roger.
And by the way, did you want to come up? Yeah, and while you're walking down here, I just want to say anything. They had the dedication of the bricks in the park on May the 10th, and Reverend Ash would scream at me if I didn't tell him he still has 100 more bricks to sell. So those who haven't bought bricks or need more bricks, don't throw them, buy them from him so they can, so they could install them in the park, please.
I do need another brick.
Good. Reverend Ash, see Reverend Ash. Tell him that Roger's been hawking bricks for him. I always criticize him for that.
I'll email you the form because I have them in my computer.
Thank you. I just wanted to touch base on our property maintenance. What kind of ordinance do we have? And how is it enforced?
Phil, would you mind answering that?
The property maintenance code adopted is the International Property Maintenance Code, I believe it's 2009 edition, and it's enforced through our fire prevention office. We have 3 part-time housing/property maintenance inspectors who go out and, respond to complaints and identify sites and send out the notices, et cetera.
Because I know we have a big township and we have a big problem with property maintenance, as Amy had said. It's an eyesore, a lot of properties. So I know other townships, as in Buena Vista, they will put liens on the homeowners if they don't cut the lawn or keep their house looking nice, falling down. Some of my neighbors' houses I'm going to appeal my taxes to begin with because of my neighbors' houses. I know I'm going to win that
Did you
one.
see the agenda tonight? You'll even notice on there were some liens against some of those properties. They do it all the time where they're cutting the grass or trying to clean. You understand the size of this township.
Oh, absolutely.
I think the goal initially, as I understand it, and Phil, if it's changed, let me know, and Michael, please, was that once it started, we would work in the Mays Landing area and work out in concentric rings, because, I mean, you drive around, you know, the front of the property looks great. You could look in the backyard and you see something you haven't seen in generations, so, yes.
Yes, and I agree, but I think something more has to be done, because a lot of people aren't doing things. You go by houses, they don't care. They're not cutting their lawn. They leave their trash out for weeks. They
Yes.
throw stuff. You have bulk day once a month. As I said before, is in Buna Township, they fine them, and their properties don't look as bad as ours do. A lot of our properties make our township look very not nice,
You're right.
you know? And me, for one, pretty soon might want to move out of my township, because we're not maintaining, we're not doing the best that we
Well,
can.
you know, I said it at the last meeting, and Ingrid could testify to it, that on Earth Day, part of the neighborhood in Harding Lakes, they had a group of people come in, and they just got tired of what's been going on, and they started cleaning it up. I think that's what it takes. We have someone in the audience, you have Bruce Stry, who single-handedly in this township has been tackling the lawn sign issue. You see 99% less lawn signs around, because he's been pushing that issue to get them collected, to notify those people, send them a letter and tell them that if you continue to do it, you will be fined. Consequently, you see very few. The only ones I know he couldn't even get is he can't jump that high up the telephone poles, right, Bruce? Huh? But he's done a great
And I also
job with
noticed down
that.
Weymouth Road, they've picked up a lot of garbage. I don't know who's responsible for that, but we should have more of that, because I'd be more than willing to have my grandchildren, my kids come out and help. This is our
Sure.
township, and I want to keep it as nice as we possibly can. And if we have to fine people, put liens on their houses, oh, well, you got to hit them in the pocket, because they all like their money. So I'd appreciate if there's anything else we could do.
Your comments are appreciated, and Phil, I think you're also, are you expanding the time, the hours of some of your inspectors? And were you, Michael, expanding the time, the hours of some of your inspectors so that they could?
We're reaching out to one of our inspectors who isn't working his full allotment, and we're trying to get him to focus on grass and signs on our local roads.
Okay, please.
So, yeah,
You're one
grass
of many
mowing
that
enforcement.
raises that issue, so you're not alone in your
Oh, I know I'm
comments.
not alone, and thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I know y'all want to go home now.
No, that's
No,
all right.
it's fine.
It's still okay. You stayed long enough to bring your comments forward, and I think we have an obligation.
Thanks, Chris.
Yeah, the other thing that we might mention is the responsibility of the banks who have foreclosed. We're working on an issue of that in the state legislature.
Legislature.
Yes,
It's all right.
thank you. But that presents a problem, because they just let the places go.
Well, they've taken a blind eye to it. So is there anyone else in the public who wishes to speak? Sir?
About the direct deposit, it's mandatory. Direct deposit is mandatory. Yes.
Okay.
Division of Pensions told me, Social Security told me, and Transamerica Life Insurance Company told me. It's mandatory.
All right. Good comment. Thank you. Appreciate it.
And direct deposit, it's a good thing, because that way I won't lose my pension check in the mail.
That is a good thing.
It's a good thing.
It is a good thing. I agree with you.
And Social Security, too.
It's safer. Thank you. Anyone else in the public?
Roger, when the public's finished, the other property maintenance item was just triggered while Chris was talking, and it's that problem with the dryer vents at,
Yeah, that hasn't come up, and I don't think they've come up with a solution yet, have you? About the dryer vents at Meadowbrook? Okay.
What I was going to say to you is that it's the dryer vents at Meadowbrook because of the property maintenance code. If
know.
we're going to change the property maintenance code, we could delete the rental of Meadowbrook from that inspection. We can make an
Just
adjustment.
got to be careful with that, you know. That's a whole nother dialogue. I always am concerned about the safety factor and fire hazard, but had you made a motion to close the public portion?
I was going to
Go ahead.
make a motion to close the public portion.
Second.
Motion is second. Any questions or comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion adjourned. Bob?